can be found by visiting Broomfield website at broomfield.org. Our agenda this evening includes 1 concept review and 2 study session items. The public may attend tonight's meeting and future council meetings in person at the George DeCiero City and County Buildings Council Chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Broomfield's website. The public may also participate in public comment on the concept review item only, either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item, and individuals attending in person will speak first. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 participants have 2 minutes, and if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. Again, if joining virtually for public comment, the number is 855-695-3744 and press *3 to be placed in the queue. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. Please call several minutes before the agenda item and press *3 to be placed in the queue. If joining in person, we'll ask you to step up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and as stated earlier, public comment will be welcomed on the concept review item only. Tonight's concept review is a proposal for a mixed-use development called Village of Westview and is located along Skystone Parkway. We will follow the city standard procedures for concept plan reviews. First, the staff will present a summary of the application. Following the staff summary, the applicant will make their presentation. We will then take comments from members of the Land Use Review Commission and other interested advisory boards, followed by a public comment. Then the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments, and finally questions and comments from City Council. Electronic copies of concept review plans are available at broomfieldvoice.com. Copies and comments provided for each plan at broomfieldvoice.com have been provided to the City Council and can be found by clicking the correspondence link at the bottom of tonight's agenda. Council members have a copy of the agenda memorandum for this proposal, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council, and good evening, community. It's always good to be back in person, regardless of what that event is. So it's good to see everyone. We will be walking through this item. I know that it is a hot topic. We do have the applicants, so staff will present first. Applicants will present, and then we'll do Q&A with council and community feedback. With that, I'm going to introduce Shelby Jablon, and she'll walk us through this item. Ms. Jablon.
Good evening. Can we have the next page, please? The concept proposal tonight is for a mixed-use project titled The Village at Westview. This is within the Great Western Park PUD plan area. The subject proposal includes townhome units, a brewery and restaurant, a drive-through pad site, and 5 two-story mixed-use buildings. Next page, please. The subject proposal is located on 2 parcels at the northwest corner and southwest corner of Skystone Parkway and Sim Street. This is adjacent to the existing Skystone Senior Living community. And there is a single-family residential community within the city of Westminster located to the southwest of the proposed project. The 2 parcels are a total of 13.31 acres in size. Next page, please. And if we could please play the video. The video starts at the intersection of Sims and Skystone. It's looking north. The video pans to the west to show the northern parcel, pans across Skystone Parkway, and then we'll show the southern parcel here, which is adjacent to those single-family residences in Westminster. The video is going to pan south, and we are going to end looking south on Sim Street. Thank you. The Broomfield Comprehensive Plan designation for the subject properties is commercial with an open lands buffer on the southern parcel. The concept proposal for mixed use is not consistent with the comprehensive plan land use designation and will include a residential component. An amendment to the comprehensive plan will be required. However, the subject proposal has resulted or will result in a positive impact on the long-range financial plan as the project will include increased retail in the area. Next page, please. The northern parcel of the development will be entirely commercial and will include a brewery and restaurant, pickleball courts, as well as a pad site. The southern parcel will feature 5 two-story mixed-use buildings and 15 2- to 3-story townhome buildings, providing a total of 60 units. The proposed mixed-use buildings will include bottom floor retail and office space and residential on the second story. The applicant has indicated that the proposal will include a request to reduce the existing 100-foot buffer area on the southern parcel to approximately 50 feet. Access to the north parcel will be provided through 2 ingress-egress points along Skystone Parkway, and the southern parcel will feature 2 access points, one located off Skystone Parkway and one off Sim Street. The applicant has indicated that the buildings will remain within the 38 feet height limitation, and the grade will be restored as close as possible to historic levels prior to construction. Next page, please. The applicant has provided example renderings which show modern architecture and outdoor seating areas. Architecture will be further reviewed during the formal development review process. Next page, please. The applicant has completed public notice for this meeting and has held a neighborhood meeting, which was on 2/26/2022. A summary of comments heard at the neighborhood meeting has been included in the correspondence folder. And staff has identified the proposed reduction of the landscape buffer as a key issue. Thank you. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. The applicant's presentation is next. Will the applicant's representative please identify themselves for our listeners before beginning your brief presentation this evening?
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Council. My name is Josh Keenan.
My name is Jamie Miles. Perfect. If we could go to the next slide. Great. We're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to expand a little bit on what Shelby has presented here as far as orientating everybody to where these 2 parcels are, and then we'll get into a little bit of introduction of J&J Management and our entity. A couple things that I want to point out in reference to these 2 plots of land is I've gone ahead and we've added the further development of the Verve light industrial park that is north of us, north of 112th, as well as the Sims Technology Park, and we'll kind of talk about that later as we get into the presentation. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. A little bit about J&J Management. We're currently the co-founders of J&J Management. We have built and operate this building over in the village of Five Parks, which is essentially a mixed-use plan as well, just a little bit south in northwestern Arvada. Jamie, you want to add anything?
Yeah, the building that you're looking at here is very similar to the mixed-use buildings that we're proposing. It's in the center of that southern plot where it's 2 stories with commercial on the first floor and then residential on the second floor. J&J Management also operates several of the businesses that are inside of this building, including Lot 1 and Lot Q.
Next slide, please. So as we start to build this out, one of our concepts was community. Everything we want to do is based on the community. And so what we're doing is we're building essentially a village here, right? Where people want to eat, work, play, live, and exercise. And that's why we added, the fun features of the Pickleball Brewery, for instance, one of the fastest growing sports in America right now. And then, we've heard over and over and over again about the desire of cutting and pasting what we have in Five Parks up into the city and county of Broomfield. So we're excited to, as Shelby mentioned, have 5 commercial buildings up there, as well as surrounded by a number of townhomes. And within those townhomes, there's community gathering spots and a few components to that, which we have taken into account with putting this design together. So we know that, they do run up to existing residential homes, Westminster residents. And so we've purposely moved those buildings at a 90-degree angle so that we are, trying to maintain some sight lines and provide as much green belt area for those existing residents as possible, and to lessen the impact of a new development, which, we are excited about this development in the fact that we are not only, bringing a great feature to the city and county of Broomfield, but also the neighboring Westminster residents. And when you add in the Verve project, the Sims Technology Center, the ability to, have these working professionals be able to, commute on a bike, for instance, to these areas, is something that we're, potentially excited about. Jamie?
A couple other comments on the drawing. As you look at how we've oriented the townhomes, another key thing to note is that any of the balconies would not face back into the existing neighborhoods, right? We set it up so balconies would face towards the other townhomes. And on the western edge of that is going to be fairly reduced windowing, right? So the majority of the windows are on the fronts and backs of those buildings that basically face towards one another. Again, in consideration to make sure that we're being mindful of the neighbors that are already there. The other thing to note on here is that we know that as project is going through, that there's going to be work that needs to be done on Sims. We're already aware of that. We know that there'll be a median that's going to go in. And as such, our understanding is that that secondary access that's coming off of parcel 2 will be a right out, right in. And so that's the way we're currently planning for the property.
Next slide, please. Perfect. So this is, focused on the north parcel. We currently have 2 planned developments over there. One we may end up selling off, which is that coffee drive-through. Jamie and I's philosophy is local, community. And so, we would be ideally targeting some sort of local coffee house, if we could, into there. As far as the pickleball place goes, if you've ever played pickleball, you know how fast the sport is growing. And to combine it with kind of a brewery gastropub concept, not only is great for, families, but also, a number of retirees. We're super excited about that possibility. There's also non-pickleball activities there as well. There's cornhole and other things. Another thing that we will actually do in this building is up in the top right-hand corner, you see that rooftop deck. I think from our research, it might be the first rooftop deck in Broomfield, which would be an exciting plaque that we could put on the wall. And when you're sitting there and where it's in reference to, it actually looks due west, right past Brocade and up that valley. So the attractiveness of that patio is going to be super. We're also planning on having a kind of a special events room in there so that we can host sports teams and retirement parties and those kinds of things, but always back to community for us.
As Josh mentioned, J&J Management does a number of things today with the properties that we have, and our intent is to be becoming multi-tiered with this as well. So we'll do the horizontal development, do the vertical development, and then manage a number of the properties. And then for some of the businesses, we're going to actually go ahead and we're planning on putting them in. So this pickleball restaurant, J&J Management is planning on that being a restaurant that we will launch and operate in the same way that we have Lot 1. The plan for it is for it to be very similar in terms of being like a gastropub, but has the pickleball concept incorporated. The other thing that I want to share is the name for the community really came from Josh and I talking about what that patio would be like and how incredible that would be to stand on it and have those western views. So we wanted to name the development something that everyone in the area would take pride in. It's not associated with any one neighborhood, it's associated with all of the neighborhoods. And we really wanted to recognize the incredible views that you would have standing on that patio, and that's really where the name for the community came from.
Next slide, please. We'll get a little bit into the buildings here on the south parcel. This first one is the commercial lofts. As Shelby mentioned, on the first floor will be commercial. On the second floor will be most likely residential. We've already had a number of folks reach out to us inquiring about the commercial spaces down below. So we're excited to bring services that the local residents can walk to. Maybe a breakfast, lunch, bakery. I've had some comments of kind of a small little grocery. So there's been a lot of interest in that commercial space downstairs. As far as the upstairs, the lofts go, most likely there'll be 2 lofts per building, maybe a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. So we're excited to be able to, once again, provide that work, eat, live, play environment for some new Broomfield residents. Okay. Next slide, please. Great. Townhomes. So here's an exciting project as well. So as we mentioned before, we purposely oriented them the way that we have. We've also provided a number of balconies. And, once again, I'm just going to reiterate the lessening of the impact of how we've turned those buildings so that, the current Westminster folks aren't looking into these backyards and these backyards into those. So it was something that we, really wanted to be concerned with and wanted to keep in mind. And, these will also be a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And then there is we just got some artist renditions of the back sides of them as well, which all have 2-car garages.
I wanted to mention on this slide that Sessions Architecture, Steve Lane is with us this evening. Steve will be our architect for the project. He's also the architect that we work with for the Village of Five Park. So we're, again, similar concepts and thinking in the way that we design it. It's a slightly different look, but it still has that kind of long-term feel to it where you look at it and go, that's not going to run out of style anytime soon, right? People are going to enjoy looking at that for decades to come. And that's important to us, right? We want this to be a place that people come to for decades to come and really enjoy the experience of being there.
Great. Last slide, please. So just in closing, we're super excited about this project. We had some really good feedback at our community meeting this past weekend, and just excited to partner with the city and county of Broomfield on this. So, thank you.
Final comment from me. We know that there's really going to be a couple of questions on this. We've had a number of different meetings, and so I just wanted to maybe make an initial statement around that. As we've looked at this property and we've looked at similar developments that have happened inside of Broomfield, we do think that a 50-foot setback is a lot more appropriate for what we want to achieve, and we know that that's going to be an ask. And again, I know that that'll be one of the comments, so I want to just address that straight on. The original drawing was more like 30 to 40, but we think pushing it back to 50 is kind of a good balance for everyone. And again, this is very different from what the property was originally set up as, with the commercial, moving this to the mixed use, and by us putting the residential at the back part and keeping all the commercial up front, we think that 50 makes sense. The secondary where you'll likely hear some questions is around heights of the buildings. Our drawings and our plans all sit inside of what is currently permitted. The only place where we might have to come back and talk is when we redo the grading and we get it back down to the original point. If it doesn't drain, then we may need to come back and talk about how do we do a little bit more of that height there so that the drainage actually works. We've had our civil out several times now, and he said, it's kind of a wonky piece of property, right? I mean, the way that the dirt was put there, it's really hard to tell how it's really going to drain. And so as we go forward, we do a lot more due diligence. And so I just want to comment that our intent is to stay in the height limit unless there's some issue with the way the drainage works. And then we would stay with the height limit, but maybe ask for the 0 point to be moved up a bit. But at the moment, if we can get it back to grade and everything works, then that's how we're planning to keep it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Miles and Mr. Timon. Teeman. Oh, that's easier. Okay, thank you both. Are there any members of the Land Use Review Commission present who would like to comment on this proposal? Commissioner Franz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I was just in Skystone last week. I have friends that live there, and they are so excited about this because they feel somewhat isolated. To the north is a lot of industrial area, commercial office buildings. They can walk now to retail. They can walk to some dining. They can walk to a grocery store. They are so enthused about this. Just a couple of quick questions. I assume the sidewalk that you said you provide will be along the whole east side of your property, because that'll be important, because there are people who live across the street on the southeast side. They'll walk to many of these amenities over there, so that'll just make it easy that crosswalk. The rec facility, and I saw the pickleball courts. I know that people will be happy about that. I assume these pickleball courts will be for the residents only. And I know those will be perfect in the spring, summer, and fall, but I didn't know if there's any indoor recreation facilities that will be available for the residents. And then I know the staff recommended that there be some mitigation for noise from the airport. And it's recommended. I don't know if you're amenable to do this and that in terms of what you can do with windows, window coverings, and installation, and so forth. And finally, I just wondered what you would do from a sustainability standpoint from possibly high efficiency appliances and so forth in the units. And then if you had the top level of a townhouse or a condo and you had access to the roof, would there be connectivity to add solar panels if those owners so desire? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other boards and commissions members who would like to comment on this proposal?
Good evening, Fred Weiss, member of the Land Use Review Commission. I had a couple of questions. In the memo, I wasn't quite clear on the amount of residential units that were going to be present in the development. You mentioned specifically the 60 townhomes, but there's also 4 out of the 6 buildings that have residential on top, and I never got a clear understanding of what the total residential units were going to be in the development. Is there going to be 60 or is there going to be more because of the second floor units? The other thing that the memo did say as far as housing goes is there was supposed to be a description of how the affordability piece was going to be handled, and I didn't hear that during your presentation. So I would like to hear what direction you're going on that. I was curious about the 100 versus the 50, the buffer. Had you actually pursued what would it take to get to the 100 feet? I was reading online, and whether or not it's accurate or not, they were saying that an outside group had said if you would eliminate 2 buildings, you could get to the 100 feet. And I didn't know if that was something that could be considered. Because I was also thinking that maybe since there are 6 buildings, maybe rather than office, you could put residential on the second floor and you might get to your number of residential units. The pickleball courts, as a tennis player and having to live with pickleball right next to me, one of the things that we have to deal with is noise. And I don't know, was it 8 courts roughly? I guess my question was, what are you going to do to mitigate the noise from the pickleball courts carrying into the residential areas? Because we've had that complaint in Anthem Ranch where I live. And I think they're going to be lit, is that right? Okay, so that extends the day as well. So I think noise levels might be something that you would want to look at to see what you can do about it. The airport, it's on the main runway. I was just curious as to what you're going to do to make sure the tenants understand that they're living on a runway, or I mean, they're living below a runway, and it's the prime runway of Rocky Mountain Airport. The other thing, could we go to the site plan for a second? On the north parcel, although I think you were showing a double drive-through, which obviously that rendering is of a single-use building, the one with the drive-through, and you had shown a double drive-through coffee, and I don't know how that would affect the parking on this. Like, you're going to have a double drive-through, obviously you're going to need more space for each drive-through. And the other thing I was wondering on the drive-through is, how is that drive-through configured? Because if you go from what would be the east to the west, that is not a practical drive-through, because the drive-through window would be on the passenger side, not the driver's side. And as a restaurateur for many years, you don't put a drive-through on the passenger side versus the driver's side. So the west to east would work if that's the way it's going to be designed, but the east to west would not. You understand? Okay. And the other thing is I think that's an island where the drive-through either enters or exits. Where the purple, I guess those are purple trees, and there's an island there. One thing is you're only going to be able to get traffic from one way because the island isn't open far enough for anybody to go anywhere but turning right. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Weiss. Any other boards and commission members? Yes.
Members of council. I'm Molly Goodenough, and I'm a member of the Land Use Review Commission. Fred and Earl have done a superb job of everything I wanted to say. But I did have one question, the issue of the landscape buffer and the reduction of it. Would a compromise work if you reduced the size of the buffer, but you put a berm in it so that you had some elevation that would give some privacy to the homes that back on it? The other question I had was, I noticed in reading through the materials, there was a reference to some of the units possibly being for sale units. And I wondered if, in fact, that might be something that you would be considering. And I also did not hear, as Fred mentioned, but the addressing of the affordable housing issue, but I know that will come up many times. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other boards and commissions members waiting to comment? Well, next we'll go to public comments, and you will have an opportunity to address the board comments and the public comments when they're done. So public comments are next. As mentioned earlier, the public may comment both in person or phone. If you're joining on the phone and want to be placed in the queue for comment, please call 855-695-3744 and press *3. If you're joining us in person, please line up behind the podium. Public comments will be limited to the time limits outlined earlier.
Thank you very much. My name is Travis LaBerge. I live at 11715 West 107th Avenue. Because City Council turns over so often, every time something is proposed for this land, my neighbors and I have to fight for what every City Council for the last 15 years is guaranteed, a 100-foot setback. Every time we have to start from scratch, never arguing for anything additional, just reminding council what's already been promised. These developers are smart. They have sales backgrounds and they're selling us on the idea that this is the best offer we're all going to get, and they're willing to walk away if the setback is slashed in half. That's not the case. They're negotiating a sales price with Taylor Morrison that takes into account what restrictions this City Council decides to enforce. So please enforce the setback. They've known about the setback from the beginning. They would not have invested this much time, effort, and money if they weren't 100% sure they could do this at 100 feet. With this housing and rental market, they could probably complete the project at 200 feet and still make plenty of money. It would be a dangerous precedent for the City Council to unilaterally go against the decisions of every City Council for the last 15 years out of fear of losing the project. Housing is in demand, prices have never been higher. You can get what you want, they can get what they want, Spag and Stone can get what they want, and we can get what's been promised. Despite all of this, I floated the idea of a compromise of 75 feet to the developers a few weeks ago. Anna Bertanzetti probably fell off her chair when she heard that I did that, because I've never done anything like that before. We walked the land together, the developers and I showed them why the distance of 75 to 100 feet works and why 50 does not. And part of that has to do with an existing berm that's there. I told them that they agreed to 75 feet and observed the building height restrictions. I would come here tonight and support the project. They rejected it out of hand. They said they wanted to see what City Council would require them to do. So I'm asking you to require them to do the 100 feet. These guys are smart. They probably have 2 or 3 backup plans waiting, just waiting to see what you say tonight. So in closing, I hope it's clear that despite having been against the last 2 major proposals that have come before City Council for concept review, I am not against this project. I'm on record last spring of saying that mixed-use development would be a good idea. I think other than the setback and potential building height restriction, this is a fantastic idea. I know something will be built on this land at some point, and I'd rather it be something like this than something like the terrible idea we saw last spring. Please keep in mind that multiple City Councils before you understood the many compromises and sacrifices that were made to establish the 100-foot buffer. And when you make your comments about this project tonight, please make it clear that the setback needs to be respected and enforced. They're not going to walk away. They're smart, but you are too. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Glenn Freundlich. I live at 11875 West 107th Avenue. I've been there since 1984. And I would like to point out that this is not Westminster. Meadowview, where Travis lives, is Westminster. We live in unincorporated Jeffco. So just to set the record straight on that. My property backs up to the southern parcel. I've been part of meeting with developers. I went back and looked at the original PUD plan, and they apparently more than 20 years I've been meeting, way back, going back 20 years that I've met with developers along the way. And we did come up with this agreement for the 100-foot setback, and I would hate to see that just discarded out of hand. It's been the product of a lot of work on both sides of this issue here. I also want to see the 30-foot building height measured from the original grade. And the berms retained. That's still spelled out in the existing amendment, the latest amendment to the PUD plan. I like the idea of having some kind of a brewery there. I think it'd be really nice just to be able to walk over and have a beer or two, maybe run into neighbors. I just wonder about the viability of it. With what's in the area now, with all the breweries and all that, I'm just not sure how well that would work. I understand it might be a restaurant, not just a brewery. If it is successful, looking at the diagram that we had, I don't see how there's enough parking for it. On my way here today, I drove past Four Noses, and if any of you have been up there on a nice day like this, you know how many cars that brings. I also wonder about the viability of the retail that's shown in the southern parcel, given the amount of vacancies we have within 5 minutes of here. And again, if they are successful, I don't see enough parking, considering there might be residential up above. I understand there's going to be garages under the townhomes. People don't use their garages for vehicles all the time. They're going to have guests over. They're going to have more than 2 vehicles. I didn't see from the diagram there'd be enough parking. The last thing is, you were asking about the drainage, and I'd be happy to talk about that, which I've done, I think, at every proposal that's come up here. Ever since the dirt storage was added back there, the drainage from the main stormwater drain in the neighborhood goes on a ditch by my property. And even a moderate rain, the water backs up into my yard. A heavy rain, I end up with 1.5 foot of water in the backyard, which is great for the plants, but probably not good for the electrical and the other utilities that might be back there. Anyways, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gary Mann, 12915 Elkhorn Road. I live in Scottsdale, and I've addressed the council over the last 5 years for everything that's been proposed for that development. And this is the first one I'm up here in favor of, okay? This is a unique opportunity for Broomfield. It has to have on the south side a zone change to go to hybrid from commercial. And so I appreciate our neighbors, okay, and but they worked out the PUD, but that was for commercial. That's what they're zoned for right now, was a commercial setback for 100 feet. And I totally agree, on a commercial development, there should be a 100-foot setback. But when you have a residential to residential, I'm not so sure that setback fits anymore. I would like to see as much setback and berm as the developer can possibly do. But this is a majority of this development meets the neighborhood retail concept that the council has been looking for. And these guys have already, they're local, they're not out of state. I mean, this is, somebody coming in and telling us from some other state what we need and what's going to be so great. These guys are right down the street. They've already got proven concept. If you haven't been down to Lot 1 and 5 Parks, oh my God, it is a village community and they love it down there. And Skystone wants this terrifically. So I appreciate your time, and we're in favor of it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ed Bodnar. I live at 12784 Sandstone Drive in Skystone. I'm here to share with you the overwhelming support that I feel in our community for this project. Josh and Jamie presented on Saturday to a group in our lodge. I couldn't help but feel that it was almost overwhelming that everyone really would like to see this project come in. It's all that we've talked about as far as having a restaurant and a pastry shop and a coffee shop and all those kinds of nice amenities because we are out on the far western tip of Broomfield. I guess I can't say anything more. I know that the city and the city planning will work out these issues that have been brought up, and they're all very valid. I totally understand that. I'm here to just tell you that we really would like to see it come through, and we hope that you'll see it that way as well, and know that you will work towards resolving whatever issues there are. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
I'm Linda Tilley, 12777 Elkhorn Road in Skystone. And you can probably tell by my accent that I'm new to Colorado and new to Broomfield. Our daughter and her family live in Westminster. We love this area, but the one thing that we find missing is services, restaurants. I've never lived anywhere that I've had to drive so far to go to a coffee shop or a bakery or a dry cleaners or any of the other kinds of services that are being discussed for this project. We just don't have anything, as you all know, in this area of Broomfield. And I echo what was said, that overwhelmingly, although there were questions at the presentation on Saturday, certainly there were questions, but overwhelmingly, there was great response to this proposal. And I welcome it. Should it go forward, just as a resident or citizen who will use it, but I also look forward to boosting the coffers of the city county from the taxes that will come from this development. I think it has so many positives and look forward to how you all respond to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in person who would like to comment? Please step to the podium.
Yeah, I'm Bill Dodd. I live at 10619 Union Way in Walnut Creek. And the only thing I have when looking at this is I question if you're putting in the 60 townhomes and it's mixed usage, where the kids going to go and play. I don't see anything. I was building in the 55 older neighborhood. There wasn't any of that put in, and for a reason. But if you're going to have this for mixed use, you need that. And the traffic issues on that corner are getting bad already. To add all of this stuff without good on and off is questionable, let alone for the parking. Right now, I'm the sole owner of the house, and I have 4 cars. And my next door neighbor has 5. His garage is full of other stuff. He parks 3 in the driveway and 2 on the street. So I just question whether or not just 2 parking spaces is sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chambers want to comment before we move to our residents on the phone? All right, we're moving to our public comment on the phone, and first we'll go to John Hunt.
Thank you. John Hunt. I live at 11735 West 107th Avenue. My backyard bumps up to the southern parcel in this development. And when purchasing this property, we understood from city council there was a 15+ year precedent on the 100-foot setback. Whether it's mixed use or residential is behind my house. I feel like not only the 100-foot buffer, the berm, and the landscape that's there should be upheld. And I'd also ask everybody that doesn't live directly next to this property to think about if you did and vote that way. I don't think that I need to have somebody's garage 30 feet away from my backyard while my kids are playing. I can't understand from the diagram how much light is going to be there. I can see the stars from my backyard now. I don't think that's going to be a possibility when this happens. And I also would bring up the fact that outdoor pickleball courts are going to be used for about half the year. The rest of the year, it'll be in water or snow. There'll be lights on that. There'll be noise coming from it. Do you really want people standing on top of a 30-foot plus rooftop deck drinking and playing music until whenever at night while you're trying to do things in the evening, that right now we have no repercussions of that. There's no noise, there's no light pollution, there's no cars, there's no barking dogs, there's nothing else that happens right now in our area. So the 100-foot buffer to me is a small thing that we can do to uphold the 15 plus years of what this has done for all of our communities. And I'm by no means against mixed use, residential, etc. I just don't want somebody opening and closing their garage door staring into my backyard from 30 feet away when that's never been the talk of this property since the beginning. And I also will bring up that, sometimes when you hear something's too good to be true, it could be. If they're going to build the brewery and they're going to build other things first and prove that that's part of what this is going to be, that's great. But there's no issues with them building a bunch of townhouses and coming back and asking for a variance to build more homes, to build more townhomes. And right now with 60 units at fair market value, you're looking at about $2.5 to $3 million in residential rent, and it's all rentals. So who are these tenants going to be? They're not homeowners like any of us. They're people that come and go and leave crap all over and can trash our neighborhoods and have nowhere to take their kids, park all of their cars on the road, and influx what we already have here, which is traffic and light and noise. So those are my main remarks. And outside of that, if we are going to do this, and that's something that the city council wants to do, I'm wholeheartedly behind it. I just don't know who these tenants are going to be, and if J&J are going to be managing all of the properties, dealing with all the properties, and et cetera. I have no idea how they have the wherewithal with having two people talk as the co-owners, and we haven't seen anybody else from this company and how they're going to handle any resolution that comes from when people want to leave stuff all over their backyard, or how they're going to enforce the fact that this is going to be just as good of a community as Skystone or Walnut Creek or
Mr.
Meadow
Murphy,
or any of the other ones that exist.
Your time has expired. Thank you. We're moving on.
Thank you very much.
Christine LaBerge.
My name is Christine LaBerge, and my family and I live at 11715 West 107th Avenue. Our house is in Westminster. However, Broomfield borders our back fence. While this concept certainly is an improvement over formal proposals, building height maximums and the 100-foot buffer must be maintained. I'd first like to talk about building height. The 38-foot maximum height was based on historic grades, not on the elevated pad. This distinction was documented by Broomfield on November 5th, 2013. The submitted concept plan is unclear on building height for one main reason. The developers have shared that the purchase price of the land parcels is still being negotiated. Taylor Morrison and the developers want to see what city council will require them to do. Basically, they want to see if they have to follow the rules or not. As a civil engineer, I have reviewed this site. Maximum building height can easily be met at 38 feet from historic grade if dirt is removed from the pad and retaining walls are utilized. Grading is certainly easier with a higher pad height, but it's absolutely feasible to attain positive drainage if the pad height is reduced to the original grade. Regarding the buffer, a rough conceptual site layout demonstrates that the 100-foot buffer could easily be honored by reducing the number of townhouses by just 2, from 15 to 13. And this is not just residential backing residential. This is single-family homes backing large 3-story multi-family buildings. 100-foot is absolutely needed. It is required. If City Council upholds the 30-foot maximum height and the 100-foot buffer, the developer will likely ask Taylor Morrison to adjust the sales price of the land. If you're wondering if Taylor Morrison is capable of reducing the price, considering this, on February 8th, Taylor Morrison announced that it earned $2.51 billion during last quarter. That's up 21% compared to the same quarter last year, and they expect to grow by 41% in the coming year. I understand that I'm a City of Westminster resident. Some Broomfield residents have even questioned why this council should listen to me at all. It is my hope that city councils will respect the rights of neighboring city residents, as well as those of their own residents. All communities, a word that was used by this developer in his presentation, exist in harmony by following accepted rules that show respect and consideration for each other. Just as I wouldn't expect the City of Westminster to suddenly change the open space designation on the dog park bordering Broomfield Skystone residents, it's my sincere hope that this City Council will uphold the requirements on this property and not disregard them because it's City of Westminster or Jefferson County residents that border the land. That would be a very dangerous precedent to set, especially considering that every Broomfield City Council for the past 15 years has upheld these requirements. The bottom line, this project can truly be a win-win. This project does have value for current residents, future residents, and the city and county of Broomfield, and it can be successfully built honoring the 38-foot maximum height and the 100-foot buffer. Please respect the rights of existing residents and uphold those requirements of this property. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Zachary Wesley. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Zachary Wesley. I live at 11675 West 107th Avenue here in Westminster, so Meadowview Estates and Walnut Creek. I've seen multiple concept designs come through in this area the last few years that I've lived here, and I've pushed really hard for every single one of them to not come through because of the quality of what they were and what they wanted to do to the land behind our house. If you look at the concept plans again, I'm the first house that you'll see coming into the neighborhood, and although the developers, J&J, stressed that they've turned all these buildings 90 degrees to homes, that's not the case for my backyard and my neighbor. I will not only have 4 new units that are set up behind my house. So it's 4 individual family homes that will border pretty much my backyard solely. So my big point here is let's stick with that 100-foot buffer. To me, that's going to be a big thing because I have 2 kids that'll play in the backyard. If there's 4 families behind us, it's going to be disruptive to their sleep cycles, their sleep patterns with where they sleep in our home. The other question I have is going back to the original grade. A lot of the plans that we've seen in the past have said, we'll stick to the 38, but they want to do it with the grade that it sits today. I think we really need to go back. If the council would really focus on that for us, taking it back to original grade with the concept designs that they've shown, there were multiple balconies that were up on those 3rd level homes. And if these things are going to sit anywhere near the grade is now versus the original grade, we're going to be sitting in our backyards staring at, multiple families looking down and waving and smiling potentially, or we don't know what they could be like as neighbors back there if they're renting these places as opposed to owning. The other concept that I really actually like about this is having some things in there like a coffee shop, a restaurant, a brewery, some retail sources, a little store that I could walk back to would be absolutely wonderful. We really do in Walnut Creek like this idea and this concept, but we would really like the council to focus again on keeping that original 100-foot buffer and that original grade. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we have Jill Strauss. Ms. Strauss?
444. Hi, this is Jill Strauss. I live at 12444 Red Fox Way. I'm a Skystone resident. And besides the fact that I am very much in favor of this development, one of the things that really struck me when I'd seen the presentations, and I was fortunate enough to also get to be in a focus group with Josh and Jamie, Broomfield is geographically about as disjointed as you can get. And yet there is a deep desire to make it more of a village or a community. So what we have to compromise with is several villages and communities. And what this development would create, it would help to create that village community atmosphere. The other thing I would say about the concerns about the mixed use development, and I understand about being so close to single family homes, obviously this was never going to be empty space. But Five Parks is completely multi-use and multifunctional. There are apartments, there are condos, there are townhomes, there are lofts, there are many beautiful single-family homes. And there is, of course, the retail area where Lot 1 is and Lot Q. And so I would encourage you to take a look at that and see how well they have managed a very well integrated environment to bring a community together, which I think this can do for the businesses that surround us and for our subdivision and for the subdivisions that are next to us and across the street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that is all the online comments that we have. Does the applicant have any final comments that you would like to address after the feedback? Yeah. Your turn.
All right, so I'm just going to go down the line in no particular order here. So as far as the comment about the high efficiency appliances, solar, renewable energy, that kind of comment that was made, yes, that will definitely be part of our plan as we move forward into design. Steve, our architect, has incorporated a number of those functions already into the existing building that we built in lot 1. Plans for solar on the roof, things of that nature. Pickle. As far as the sidewalk goes, yes, what Janie mentioned, the enhancements to Sims, which there, most likely will be that sidewalk connecting and helping those residents from Westminster as well as Broomfield get to those amenities. Not just affordable housing.
Yeah, sure. So the residents question, so the way it's drawn right now, 60 townhomes, and then there are the 5 buildings that are mixed use. If we were to do residential on all of those, it would be 10 more, right? So it'd be 70, would be the total count on that. Affordability and attainability is really important. We know that, we're working with the city. We don't have the full plan on that yet, so we're in process on that. Our plan is that some of these units are going to be rental and some are going to be for sale. That's part of that same conversation. We recognize that a blend of that is really important, both the attainability and affordability, as well as offering rental units and then having units that are available for people to purchase. We think that's part of a vibrant community as well as that blend. So we don't have that fully documented how we're going to do that yet, but we are working with the city on a plan for that. Wanted to talk a little bit about the statements that were made regarding the contract negotiation we were under with Taylor Morrison. It's inaccurate. We've actually already signed a PSA with them. So we're not attempting to have this conversation tonight to then go back and renegotiate with Taylor Morrison. We're in our due diligence. We're going to find out if this works, right? So we do still have the ability to walk away from the deal, but we're not negotiating the way that I think it was portrayed this evening. Jeff.
Yep. A number of questions about the pickleball. So it may be hard to tell from the artist's sketches so far, but they'll actually be both indoor and outdoor pickleball courts. So obviously, last week when it was sub-zero, everybody was playing pickleball indoors. But if it's like today when it's 70, everybody will be outdoors, and a mixture of both. And the indoor ones actually have the garage doors that open on both sides. So not only will it be for weather, but also for noise. As far as the lights go and the light pollution that was mentioned, we purposely put it on the north parcel. We put it on the north parcel so it was farthest away from all the residents, to help eliminate that impact. Couple comments were made about parking. This is a concept, right? This is a concept drawing. And we know, as building developers, that there is a certain amount of parking spots that are needed, depending on if it's a restaurant compared to an office, compared to a residence. We've experienced that with the city of Arvada. I'm sure the same holds true with the city and county of Broomfield. So as we continue to go down this road, our land planner, our architect, we will be figuring all those parking components out.
Several comments this evening about the heights. I just want to reiterate what I had said in my original comments. We support trying to get this back down to the original grade. Our only place where we may have to leave questions open, actually one of the residents this evening spoke about how the water is running back into his neighbor or into his yard, right? So if we have to elevate it above what the original grade was just to get drainage to work, that's where we may need to come back and talk about it. But if the original grade works, then that's where we'd like to get to as well. And then the 38-foot limit that's set above that, the buildings that we've already shown this evening, the concept drawings sit inside of that envelope. Oh, that's actually a really good, Josh, you may get something to say. Also on the drainage front, we know that when we go and we actually build this, we're going to be putting concrete parking and there'll be stormwater. And we actually think that building this property out is going to solve some of the drainage problems that exist today where the water is running back. And that's just because it needs to be graded and done correctly. So the project will actually improve some of the problems that exist for the existing neighbors today.
And I guess the only other thing I'd like to have Shelby come up, if that's possible next, to kind of discuss some of the other projects that are in Broomfield that talk about setbacks and that kind of thing.
Sure. What about the airport noise?
Yeah, that's important. So we'll be looking at the right windows to deal with that. We use Anderson windows at 5 Parks. They're actually, the way that they're built, they're really quiet. I live in one of those, and so I can tell you I don't hear anything outside. And so we'll be thoughtful around making sure that we're planning that. Obviously, whether we're selling or leasing, we're going to make sure that the tenants are going to be happy, and the commercial ones below, if you're in there for a massage and you hear planes running around all the time, you're not gonna be very happy. So that's important for us to find for.
Ms. Jablon, did you want to?
Yeah, so we do have a few examples in Broomfield of where we have denser housing styles abutting single-family residences. So a few examples that we can name are Westlake Townhomes, which has approximately a 50-foot buffer from single-family residences. We have Willow Park, which has a 50-foot buffer, and then we have Greenway Park. Thank you, Anna. And then we also have some of our newer planned unit developments, such as Baseline and Dillon Point, that have differing densities of styles of homes across local streets. So that would be about 25 feet, which is a much lower buffer area.
Thank you very much. Does that wrap up your final comment? Thank you, gentlemen. So does any member of council have any questions? I'll start with Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. It is good to spend another evening here with my friends in Skystone discussing this lot or these lots. We've been through this a few times now, and I just want to say how excited I am to see a proposal that will finally bring the services that the Skystone community desperately needs. So I'm very excited about this development. I didn't think it was possible to get a development with restaurants and walkability and all these things based on what other developers have brought forward. So it was a huge accomplishment in my mind to see something come forward like this that'll finally bring that community feeling that Ms. Strauss was talking about on the call. So I'm just really excited. In terms of the kind of elephant in the room, which is that setback, over the weekend, I thought about it a lot. And I did talk to staff today a little bit about what we did in other parts of Broomfield with similar dense styles of budding existing residential neighborhoods. And there wasn't anything near 100 feet. For commercial, there definitely was, but for residential uses, I think the fair thing to do is to hold Westminster standards to the same standards that our Broomfield residents have had in those types of developments. So the one I remember that was very controversial was the Dillon Point development, which was 65 feet, but the buildings were much taller. So I think, we should hold this development to those standards. I think 50 feet is acceptable, and try to keep as much of that berm as you can. But my biggest goal would be to get rid of the drainage problems. I mean, this is probably the hardest lot in the town to develop because of the filter, the drainage problems, the lack of density of housing around it. It's just a very difficult lot to develop. So, we need to get services for the people at Skystone, and we need to address the drainage problems. So thank you for bringing this forward and offering to do that. I don't have any additional questions. You guys did a really good job moving forward and answering the concerns of residents. I look forward to seeing your sustainability plan and your affordability plans as it comes forward. This is just a concept review, so not going to get too far in the details, but I think the residents of Skystone are overdue on getting walkable services. So they're as much a part of Broomfield as anywhere else, and they have a distinct lack of restaurants of anything. So I'm just so excited to see you guys bring this forward, and I'm excited to go play some pickleball. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing this in the next stage.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo my colleagues' comments with how excited I am that this project is. You have brought this project to Broomfield. I know it's something sorely needed in that area. It was definitely something I heard quite often on the campaign trail earlier last year. And I too also in favor of the 50-foot setbacks. I think we should have the consistency of rest of residential in Broomfield is 50 foot. This should also be 50 foot. I understand that previous councils have kept it at 100, but that was when it was zoned for commercial. And this is not going to be entirely commercial development. Also, some of the neighbors in Westminster, they have neighbors right next to their backyard, and that's probably less than 30 feet. I only have two questions / comments. The secondary access on Sims, that is for people to, the residents in those townhomes, correct? The right in, right out on the secondary access that's on Sims. It's not like one of those where it's for emergency purposes only that I've seen on some. Okay. Okay.
Just not just for residents, for commercial
Yeah.
access.
Just wanted to make that crystal clear because I know that was some comments I heard from residents who emailed or called me. And then the other one was some residents were concerned about the traffic that was going to occur because of the drive-through for the coffee shop, and we're maybe hoping that you would just make it a no drive-through, just regular old coffee shop, especially since you are doing more local and not a Starbucks per se, which we know they're specifically focusing on drive-throughs. So I don't know if it's, since this is just a concept at the moment, if that's something you could look into.
I mean, we'll look at that and actually.
Mr. Miles, yeah, the mic's better for the recording, I'm sorry.
I feel like I'm started speaking. I think we'd be open to looking at that. Our plan right now is for that to be a pad that we would likely sell, part of the way of kind of financing, building it up. So it really depends on whether or not we could get somebody that was interested in buying it, didn't need the drive-through. As you've mentioned, a number of companies are starting to lean towards that, but it's not a fixed requirement from my side. And I'm remembering that we missed a question. That picture with the double-sided, that was more concept. The way that it's drawn on the plan is more accurate, where you would turn in and then it's immediate right, and you're driving west to east, so that you're correctly getting in on the right side, on the driver's side, and then you flip back around and exit back out. So sorry about missing that question, and we would be open to that. You know, just depends on who we would be able to find to be able to take that path.
Okay. Great. And then my last comment that I'm going to have is, I know this is supposed to have a heavy focus on walkability since it is extremely close to 500 something residents in Skystone, and we have however many residents in Walnut Creek that's in Westminster and unincorporated Jefferson County. And as part of that, I really do want you to be very mindful of how much parking you do actually put in there to encourage that walkability, bikeability, and who knows, maybe eventually some transit access. That's all I have to say. So I appreciate you bringing forward this project.
Everybody laughs at transit, I know.
I'm a funny person.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Good, thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, let me congratulate you for bringing what appears to the community to be a very exceptional project, apparently based on others that have been presented to them in the past. And I want to speak directly to Mr. Weiss's comment about being a tennis player. Pickleball players are higher in status. So I speak from that platform. Here in Colorado, we play year round outside. Although it's good to hear that you're going to have some covered areas. And I also speak to the fact that there is nothing like the sound of a pickleball hitting. So for the neighbors that are concerned about the noise of pickleball, I think you'll fall in love with it. What you might struggle with is the noise of the people having their beers up on the roof. But that I assume would be mostly in the summer. I do think you're missing an opportunity though. And I think it has to do with the setback. Mr. LaBerge had mentioned that he and his neighbors are also thrilled with this project for the first time of any of the projects that have previously been presented, and has made a compromise of 75 feet rather than 100. And I think if you were to do that, you would have universal support for what you're trying to do. And I understand what you're trying to do. I disagree with my colleagues here because I think since council has been making that pledge for 15 years or so, that it would be 100 feet, they should have had every expectation that that would be the case. I think in some of these other communities where they're brand new construction all the way around, then maybe 50 feet is appropriate. And I understand this is not fully industrial, that this is more mixed use and stuff, but I think you have an opportunity here to really win over the entire neighborhood. And I think they would be willing to compromise a little bit with you around the height issue for your very point about trying to fix the drainage so that it doesn't back up into the yards of the existing people, making it more fruitful. And we understand that the land around this area is very undulating and very difficult sometimes to build upon. But I do think you're missing an opportunity. So I would be inclined to support the 75 feet if I'm going to vote for this project. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm with Councilmember Wesley. I'm new on council, so I have not seen all the previous proposals that came through this site, but I do like what I see. Obviously, this is concept review, and there are a lot of things that aren't worked out yet. The affordability issues, the sustainability issues. There's something that is very important to myself and my colleagues from our internal discussions that when this does come before us for actual approval, those are things that are going to be very important to what we want to do. The fact that you're talking about offering some of these for sale, I think is great for what we need in this community. I want to disagree with my former colleague, my previous colleague, Councilmember Wesley, and talk about the setback issue for just a second. So infill development is something that we're going to see more and more of in Broomfield and in this area. And something that I have been outspoken on and I ran on is that the idea of the era of single family home developments and standalone retail should be over. We need walkable, we need sustainable, we need affordable. And the only way to do that is through density and mixed use. And so I think this project is exactly what we need. I am very sympathetic to the neighbors that live next to this property and the 100-foot setback they've been promised against commercial development. I understand that. But in my belief is that zoning must change with the changing times and the adapting times. Zoning has to keep up with, and I'm not talking about, we shouldn't just change zoning willy-nilly just because we feel like it. But when there's a significant community benefit to the entire community changing it, I think it's time to change it. And that's kind of where I fit on this project. In order to get the walkable, the sustainable, and the affordable on this particular project, I think the 50-foot is appropriate. I do think that, if it could happen without the 50-foot, then I'd be okay with that too. But I think, we really need to focus on what the community needs as a whole. And like we've all said, if this was commercial real estate development and this was commercial against these houses, I would fully support the 100-foot. But given that this is residential and butting up against residential, I'm inclined to support the 50-foot. And that's kind of, I know this is something that we're going to be talking about going forward with any infill development. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go back to the very top topic of pickleball. Because I had to look it up. I think that makes me feel very young because I looked up that the average age of the pickleball player is 43 and 75% of players are 55 or older. So I was somewhat surprised Councilmember Lindstedt was just gearing up to play pickleball. And my question was that so much was mentioned about pickleball as cornerstone of this development. Is this adult community? Is that the plan? Because I think the point the gentleman made, and I didn't catch his name, about the lack of playground space in this development is notable. If there are kids here, they have no place to go, and I don't think they're all going to run to a pickleball court. So can you address that?
So as far as this is not an age restricted residence like Skystone is. This will be all families, retirees, downsizers, you name it. As far as amenities for kids goes, there's actually a park that is right next to the pickleball facility that was built by Taylor Morrison as part of their allocation of open space. Does that help?
There's an open space.
No, it's a park. It's a playground.
I don't live on the other opposite side of disjointed Broomfield.
If
Roughly been through skies.
Maybe we could go to one of the concept pictures and I'll
That's fine.
point it out if you need.
I just didn't see, I know Skystone doesn't have a lot, and I don't see a lot of space there. So I just was curious to please keep that in mind as you go forward. I wanted to also ditto on previous comments, sustainability is very important. Hope to see adequate electric vehicle parking. Affordability, especially if you're going to have homes above retail, there's great opportunities for affordability there as you plan this out. And I was very happy to see that there was for sale included in addition to for rental. It's been very hard to get in the community. As to the bigger elephant in the room as it's been described, I'm more inclined to agree with Councilmember Wesley. If I bought a home and there was a promise made of a 100-foot buffer, I would expect that 100-foot buffer to be honored. I don't see a distinction that has been made in terms of commercial versus residential, is because this is multifamily residential and this is multi-story residential. That has a pretty much similar impact as a commercial development in my mind. And I think the 100-foot, or to Councilmember Leslie's proposal, that please look very heavily at the 75-foot compromise. If this was truly residential, if this was single-family homes, yeah, bring the buffer down. But that's not what you're proposing. Multi-story, multi-family housing will have an impact that's different than single-family residential. And from my view, not only just the promise made to people who bought their homes with that expectation, but just livability going forward. I think that buffer makes sense. So I urge you to go with 100-foot or look really strongly and look at the 75-foot, to Councilmember Leslie's point, and make this a home run for everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Shah. He's joining us remotely.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to participate remotely. And I'm disappointed I can't be there in person. Thank you to the applicant and the landowner for your continued work to develop this parcel. There are challenges associated with this, especially with the location. One of those being the current zoning of commercial. So Broomfield councils have seen proposals for this site many times before. And in the last concept review of this site, the council pushed for a mixed use development because at that time, the proposal was for a residential only development. So I definitely would prefer this be strictly commercial, but I understand that that's going to be very difficult. So at this point, I'm willing to negotiate on that. This project, as it currently sits, will affect our long-range financial plan, though definitely not as much as our previous concept plans that included residential only. So again, I'm willing to look at that and willing to negotiate. But with that change in mind, I do not plan to support any variations to the PUD or municipal code, especially the setbacks and the height with regard to the added dirt on the site. So looking at the historical grade and the setbacks that are currently in the PUD. With that said, again, I'm willing to negotiate. I'd be very, very unlikely to approve any project on the southern portion of this development with a setback of less than 75 feet. The negotiation isn't between 0 and 100 feet. If we're going to negotiate, we should look at a negotiation between 50 feet and 100 feet, which is 75 feet. We cannot treat infill development the same as non-infill development. And we should acknowledge the impact that Broomfield has on our neighboring community of Westminster and fully acknowledge the status of this project, that it is different than other projects. And we have to acknowledge that. I'll be looking for an adherence to the housing inclusionary ordinance. I'll be looking for elements of sustainability. I'll be looking for elements around the arts and creative economy, and I'll definitely be looking for amenities for recreation other than some pickleball courts, especially for those younger residents. The sale price of this land is a negotiation for the landowner and the developer of the site. Taylor Morrison long ago put dirt on this site from another location, and it isn't a difficulty to develop this site because of the added dirt. That is just the cost of doing business for those two entities. So it's not on council to give any variances because of the added dirt that was there put there for the cost of doing business for Taylor Morrison. I am very concerned about the airport noise impacts from Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. We already have a large number of complaints coming from Skystone residents, and I would like to ensure that there is a sound study completed and that the applicant works with staff to ensure the mitigations are made on these residential units and enhance the notification on the front end of the process for all prospective buyers and renters. One of my big questions with regard to this project is the anticipated phasing of this project. I'll state my opinion, and then I would love to hear from the applicant. I would like for the commercial to be completed concurrently with the residential, or at least having the commercial be completed before the residential is completed. We've seen it time and time again that commercial and residential in a project are both proposed, and the residential is completed first, and then there's a bait and switch, and then that residential is proposed because the commercial is not viable. I do not want to see that happen with this project. So I'm hoping that the applicant at this point can tell us what the phasing of this project might be.
Thank you.
So we're figuring out the phasing. I think it's a fair question. I think the one comment that I would make right now is there are 1,000 homes that were just burned down. And so it's really hard for us to understand when we're going to be able to get contractors for certain types of work right now. So just want to be open that that's one of the variables that we're looking at. That said, I think we would like to get some of the commercial going first. We actually think that that's really important, particularly that northern parcel, to be able to really kind of get those amenities in place early into the project. As we come back with further conversations, we'll talk about what the phasing looked like, but we're not 100% sure when we're going to be able to start some of the residential building, to be really honest.
Well, yeah, so I mean, to your point, I'm hopeful that the commercial can be done first as well. It seems that with with hundreds of homes that have burned down, a lot of the residential contractors and residential supplies are going to be much needed in this area. So it means there's a reason more for building that commercial first, because those commercial contractors and commercial building supplies aren't in as great of a need. So hopefully that commercial can be done and that can be moved forward. The other piece that I'm hoping to see, and you've kind of touched upon this, that there will be a mix of for sale products and rental products on this site, especially with regard to the residential. I would like to see if there's a possibility for some for sale commercial products as well, especially as that first floor retail. If that's a possibility, there is a strong desire for sale commercial property in this area. And I think that this would be a great location for that. So if that's a possibility, I would love to see it. And with that, that's all the comments I have.
Thank you. Did you want to respond, Mr. Mills?
Just to comment again that the one pad we're planning on selling that, which I think that would be a component of a commercial sale. We haven't really thought about whether any of the commercial units would be for sale.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I will also talk about the hot topic. I am a tennis player. So, Mr. Weiss, I hear you. I also enjoy a little bit of pickleball too, but don't hit me over here. I do appreciate this. I visited the area, I believe, last year with a lot of our council members. There were a lot of drainage issues. There were a lot of, there was a lot of pushback. So I said, all right, let me visit this area. It is such a wonky place. You are right. So I appreciate you developing it, hopefully right, and hopefully, listening to our residents. I do want to push back really quickly on someone who talked on the phone about just some sort of ominous entities that, we're worried about who's renting behind us versus, owning. And I want to just reiterate, renting, there's nothing shameful about renting. When my husband and I rented in our 20s, we were wonderful neighbors. I was a high school teacher, and my husband actually served in our military. So if you're asking who's going to be possibly renting behind you, these are people who will teach your kids possibly tennis, heaven forbid, and also serving in your military. So I really want to uphold the respect and the dignity that people have when they are renting. Thank you. I do reiterate a lot of what my colleagues have said. The sound from the pickleball, I do want to see to make sure that we do some, maybe even sort of sound study eventually on that. And then if the brewery, talk to me a little bit about the brewery if you would. If it's are we thinking just a straight brewery? Are we thinking the restaurant as well? I'm just not tracking that. I apologize.
So in reference to the brewery, it is not just a brewery. It's not like Four Noses. It's not like any of the breweries over off of 108th and Old Wadsworth, for instance. This will be a gastropub. Okay, if you're familiar with that term.
Actually, I've heard that term before.
So it's very similar to Lot 1, if you will. So comfort food, high-end comfort food, right? Strong craft cocktails, good wines, a few beers on tap. But no, we will most likely not be brewing our own beer there. We'll bring in local breweries. So very similar to what we currently have over in Five Parks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just worried about bringing in like food trucks.
No, we will have our own food. There's a concept, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about, there's a concept in the Midwest called chicken and pickle. If anybody ever wants to look it up, it's a very, very successful business. And it's a destination place. So I think it would be a great addition to the west side of Broomfield, Arvada, Westminster, unincorporated Jefferson County, you name it.
Maybe we could Coloradoize it and call it chicken and pickleball. I don't know. I'm just teasing. Thank you very much.
Maybe chicken, pickle, and tennis. Maybe.
Yes, chicken and tennis. I do agree with Mr. Franz too about like players for kids. I really feel like if we're gonna have, and I really advocate for family housing in that area for families. So we see a lot of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and I would really like to see families. The windows, I noticed that you're saying are facing, let's see, you said we're not facing towards the residents that are already there, but I just have concerns, just to be aware, you don't have to answer this right now, just with the windows at least facing each other. So yes, we are maybe alleviating the windows facing the residents that are currently there, but I do have concerns that now they're facing each other. So, you know, as you start to look at the planning of that, I do have those concerns. I would err on the side of caution for that drainage too. I'm very concerned about the drainage in that area, but like you said, when you build on it, it should hopefully alleviate that. And again, I'll be looking for like things like Councilmember Schaaf said, you know, sustainability and really, you know, affordable and attainable housing and deed-restricted family access to affordable attainable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, thank you. I had a question, first of all, for staff. I appreciated the effort to compare the 100-foot setback that was promised to the Westminster residents versus the internal setbacks between Broomfield properties. Do we have any other commitments that were made to other residents in other municipalities on our borders that would be comparable to this promise that was made to the Westminster residents?
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Lim. Anna Brittonzetti, Planning Director and Co-Director for Community Development. And that title alone didn't give me enough time to think of any projects. So really trying to think of some other areas. This 100-foot buffer actually went all the way around the neighborhood. So this is unique to this project. Broomfield has a lot of planned unit development districts. So each PUD has specific and unique standards. But I can't, I'm trying to think even along the south side of 120th. I can't think of any other areas where there's specific buffering. There may be, if you're familiar with the south side of 120th, near the auto zone, I think the very south part of that parcel, there is probably between a 50 and 100-foot setback. We can get that number for you and we'll include it in the memo when we bring this project forward. And we'll do a little bit more research and make sure that we identify any others.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brittonzetti. I tend to lean towards the compromise value of 75 foot as the setback distance that I would be willing to go with. My other question is about the the public land dedication, it's depending on the public land that's already dedicated in the rest of the development in the PUD. My recollection of that playground is that it's not very large. So I guess, and you would have to cross the street from the residential part of that development to get to that playground. I guess I would invite the developer to think about if that playground is adequate for the children who are going to live there. That would be one comment I would want to throw out. And then the word intent was used a lot in the memo regarding the developer's intent to restore the grading to the historical grade. And then there's the talk about, well, maybe unless the drainage is a problem. So I am respectful of the residents' concerns about the height of the buildings unless the historical grading is restored. And I would be looking for that historical grading to be restored unless there were some really extreme circumstances that could be substantiated. So, and then I also support the sustainability and affordable housing initiatives that Broomfield would be interested in seeing also. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I want to start by saying that I very much appreciate this, that the Skystone residents showed a lot of support for this project and that we're moving in the right direction. They really, really do need that commercial and destination locations. And I think that's very important to recognize that we want to work towards this really is that end desired goal. And I appreciate the comments from especially from some of the neighbors that are the backyards are going to be back into development and that need to honor the buffer commitment. And I appreciate Councilmember Leslie's request for the compromise and others that supported it. And I also, I don't want to not acknowledge our Ward 2 representatives who are closest there that were saying the 550 was okay. So I'm kind of in the middle of all this wondering, just how much of a buffer do we need? And Commissioner Goodenough brought up the comment about a burn. And I don't think that was addressed, and perhaps you could not address it now, but just look into that as a possibility if there's something you can do with burning to somehow give more privacy. Or if there's some way that you could lower the height of the units on the ends of those townhomes to be slightly lesser height, so you don't have, so it doesn't look as intrusive. And then if you could, it appears like there's like a rooftop access on the townhome, perhaps, if you could address that. Is the intention to have some type of a roof access up there? Or was that just architecture?
For the townhomes, no, on the mixed use buildings, there might be some rooftop access on those.
So the townhomes, right, it looked like there was like a little roof and some posts. That was not a rooftop access.
On the lower part where there's the balconies, but on the upper part, there isn't. So you remember on the third story part or just on the second story part, right? We have to.
We're gonna bring up the concept.
Make sure we're looking at CPs together.
And I think what I just want to make sure is that rooftop access, especially wouldn't be nearest the single family residence. To make sure that that's not.
I understand, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That'd be really appreciated. And then if we can, I think that's gonna, it's gonna probably come up again when you come back, that we're gonna be looking for anything you can do to help the buffer between the single family homes. So thank you. And then sustainability is very important. I look forward to those rooftop solar options and charging stations and whatever you bring back and propose there. And those drainage improvements. And then I also want to put in another plug for those children. It doesn't have to be anything extensive, like it's those safe places for parents with preschoolers, keeping them away from parking lots, giving them safe places just for the kids to run around and hang out places for teens, and anything you can incorporate around, not necessarily making it a giant park, but just places, benches, hangout places for, that kids can be at, and simple things like climb on a theme parks like that. Up in our Anthem area, there's a park that just has like little stumps in the ground and things that kids can climb on, and just, anything that you can add to good places to hang out. So I appreciate bringing this forward, and I look forward to next steps. Thank you.
All right, so that's the first round, and I just have to say, I love everything about this. I did have the opportunity to tour the Five Points area, and if anybody hasn't, go check it out, and you'll see why I wanted to move there. It has everything, and I really appreciate the amount of community engagement that you've done in the last few months, because I got so many positive emails from the Skystone community that you were engaging. You took the time to answer questions. You had several meetings. You met people one-on-one. You definitely took community engagement and inclusion to a new level. So I do appreciate that, and it makes a difference. So we're going to do a second round of 2 minutes for whoever needs to ask more questions or they forgot. So first we'll go with Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I do want to echo what Councilmember Pickle said in regards to the dignity of those who rent. I myself am a renter, and some of the comments that were made, both in person and on the phone, were a little, how should I put this? Ill, I'll say, of those people. So I just really wanted to point that out. But I have another question in regards to the setback. What would, let's say, a 75-foot, the 100-foot or 75-foot that some of my colleagues want, how would that really affect the project? Just so I have that information.
So the original drawings that we did, there were 35 to 40 foot setback. That's what was in the original drawings. Actually, what you see up here. So for us to kind of build what we had drawn into that was what we had originally proposed. We got together with our architects and our engineers, and we were able to still push it forward. If we had to go to a 75-foot setback, then we would likely end up having to reduce some of the units that are inside of what we're planning for right now. I can't answer right now whether economically that still makes sense for us, but we were able to basically take what the original plan was and push it forward to get to that 50-foot, and that was where we felt that we could still continue to build the plan that we had in place. And so we haven't looked at anything further than going past the.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to bring that up because, as we are all aware, one of council's priorities is affordability, and reducing the number of units we are able to put on a property hurts the opportunity for us to have affordable units. And quite frankly, just because we made a 100-foot commitment back 15 years ago doesn't mean it's right for now, and it may not have been right for then either. So that's my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you. I'll likely just take 2 seconds here. I scanned right over my buffer answer, and I thought I looked at the whole thing and didn't even talk about buffers. Yeah, just in listening to the residents over the years, and also just what has been developed, or what you guys are planning, I would definitely say that we need to just sort of compromise. I would say 75 feet, and I also think that people, when they buy their home, they expect a certain buffer, but at the same time, we did change it to residential, so that's what I would propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members? Councilmember Marshall-Ship.
One thing I did want to bring up that I didn't forget the first time is, have you looked at any shared workspace in this development? I know as everybody's starting to work from, a lot of people work from home now, is there going to be a place where people can go? I mean, you may have 2-bedroom townhome, but you may not, have a place where you can actually work. Is that something that is proposed in this at this point?
So to address the shared workspace, like a WeWork type of thing, yes. So it's actually been one of the concepts that people are interested in. I mean, there's still a lot of residents, even in the Skystone development, that are still working, but don't want to go to an office, but want to get out of their house for a couple hours. or a small meeting area to do video conferencing. So it is something that we can consider.
And then just wanted to echo what Councilmember Ward said. What I said before, I do believe that zoning must change as we adapt to what we need going forward. And I do support the 50-foot setback. I will obviously support 75 foot if that's what it is, but I would really push for this council to not be bound by the mistakes of the past, I guess is the wrong word, but I'm not saying, and to one of the council members' point a little while ago, the neighbors, I totally understand their points, but they live next door to neighbors that are closer than 20 feet probably in some cases. So I believe that the 50-foot setback is appropriate, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other second round comments from council? None online. All right. Well, did you get some good feedback? I hope so. Well, thank you guys so much again for bringing this project forward. It's very exciting, and I look forward to seeing you come back. Thanks. We'll take a quick recess because people are going to be leaving, and I need a recess. So, how about 5 minutes? We'll be back at 7:47. Thank you. Back. Is everybody back? Can the folks go to the lobby, please? Thank you. Thank you kindly. All right. Peace. Our first study session item this evening is in response to council's request for an additional discussion related to refugee resettlement and available resources and services for individuals and families, including Broomfield Afghan evacuees on humanitarian parole. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And I was remiss not to say Happy Fat Tuesday. So the dessert, what is the dessert that is
king cake?
King cake. So Councilmember Hinkle just said, be careful when you take a big bite because you might get the baby. We all thought she was teasing, so I didn't know
It's
what that
creepy,
meant. Okay, it's very creepy.
I forgot to tell you about the baby.
So
You won.
so I got the baby. Yeah. So
It means you have to bring the next king cake when you're in New Orleans. People buy them all the time, so that's really what it means. It's your turn to buy it.
I was
Good luck
thinking,
finding it.
I was thinking you got like your birthday wish or something.
No, you just need to use it.
You
You throw the
purchase
next
it.
party.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, thank you. It's delicious. Dan Casey, Director of Human Services, has prepared the memo and also has a great deal of research and background to field the questions that council has tonight, as well as Director Shuck is also here to speak to the offerings right now that we have with the service at the rec center, as well as Assistant City County Manager Abby Yeoman can also speak to the services that are available at the library. So we're hoping for a robust conversation that doesn't require additional follow-up with the questions. So I'm hoping that we're pretty well prepared for tonight. I know that Mr. Casey is.
Thanks, Manager Hoffman. Yeah. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm Dan Casey, Director of Human Services. I will push back on Manager Hoffman's comments. I am not a refugee expert, but I have slept in a Holiday Express. I just want to go through this quick presentation with you, provide you some information so that you can have an informed conversation about what next steps may or may not be appropriate moving forward. As you know, the 18A request on January 25th from Councilmember Hinkle there was a request for us to identify additional support that other communities might be providing for refugees, particularly Afghan refugees or other refugees from other countries as well. Anyone that's in the United States on humanitarian parole. 4 things that were specifically asked for were access to mental health, and that would be through recreation centers, community centers, and more. Transportation, English language learning supports, resettlement agency connections, and as a body, you council had decided that we should do a study session, and that is what brought us here today. Just quickly, some background. As of right now, we have about 1,900 Afghan refugees in Colorado, not in Broomfield, in Colorado. And then also in Colorado, the 2020 data shows that total refugee count in all communities in Colorado is about 62,000, roughly. Next slide, please. So this is a quick slide detailing the immigration status groups. I won't go through all of them in great detail. I'm going to skip to the bottom to humanitarian parolee. That's what the bulk of our Afghan refugees are classified as right now. All 4 of the groups that are represented on this slide are eligible for Office of Refugee Resettlement funded services and benefits. Office of Refugee Resettlement is through the Department of Homeland Security. And there's a process that refugees go through to be considered in one of these categories. So humanitarian parolee allows for temporary admission to the U.S. due to an emergency. This status enables individuals to apply for asylum and work authorization. Humanitarian parolees are lawfully present in the United States. The majority of Afghan evacuees coming to the U.S. in 21 and early 22 will arrive under humanitarian parole. And then the continuing resolution passed by Congress on September 30th of 2021 made this population eligible for those ORR benefits, as I discussed a moment ago. Next slide, please. So the state of Colorado has a refugee resettlement office in the Colorado Department of Human Services. And they partner with local resettlement agencies, and that's through contract at the state level. And they provide services for refugees of all types, not just Afghan refugees. And those are, for instance, English as a second language, resettlement services, career pathways, health and wellness, youth services, and services for our elderly refugees. The Colorado Resettlement Services Program provides information specific to Afghan refugees through a number of resources, and they're all in the memo with a link to the Afghan welcome packet. The Colorado Resettlement Agencies, the one that we work with in Broomfield is Lutheran Family Services, and there's a couple of others within the state. I think there's about 6 or 7 total that serve the entire state of Colorado. But those resettlement agencies help our refugees in securing initial housing, job search, case management, access to eligible public benefits, and referrals for other services. In human services, once the resettlement agency has initiated the case, they pass on to us just the public assistance benefits caseload. And those would be all of the benefits that human services provides to any resident in Broomfield. During our research and looking into this over the last couple of weeks, we reached out to a number of surrounding communities to see what else they might provide that we were unaware of. And we talked to Aurora, Arapahoe County, Adams County, and Jefferson County, and found that there wasn't really a lot outside of the traditional benefits and referrals to nonprofit agencies or faith-based organizations. Next slide, please. So this slide is actually from one of the documents that's provided by the Colorado Resettlement Services Program. And this is all of those OOR benefits that once you're classified under one of the categories, humanitarian parolee, SIV, refugee, special parolee, or asylee, you are afforded the ability to apply for these benefits through the local county departments. I want to draw your attention just to a couple of these. One would be SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance. That is our food assistance program. The other one is Medicaid. So everybody on that column gets a yes, they're all eligible for Medicaid. The other one is community health centers, and that's for indigent medicine and behavioral health care. We also collaborate with Clinica, Mental Health Partners, Community Reach Center, and we have grant funding for those entities that is specifically designated for indigent care, underinsured, uninsured Broomfield residents. And then the last one I have starred here is our Workforce Center. We offer a wide variety of services through our Workforce Center. For eligibility, all of these programs have a laundry list of federal and state requirements and hoops to jump through. The good thing is anybody in one of those categories, again, humanitarian parolee, is eligible for those services. Requirements typically include income, household composition, and then obviously a requirement to apply for the services. And then what we always require is an interview with the recipient of services, whether that be a virtual interview or an in-person interview. You'll see on the slide here as well, the only 2 no's on this whole document would be in-state tuition. So humanitarian parolees and SQSI parolees are not able to get in-state tuition. Next slide, please. And this slide is important because this is all of the services summarized that we provide as a city and county. There's a a number of low-cost or free services that are already provided. You can also think of things like fire safety, police, roads, bridges, traffic control. But Human Services provides a large number of benefits and services. And those are things like rental assistance, again, supplemental nutrition assistance, TANF, Medicaid, all of those public assistance benefits that we traditionally refer to. Our Workforce Center also provides assistance to job seekers, and we also have educational classes, one of which is English as a second language. We have referrals to a number of agencies for English as a second language. Public Health and Environment also provides a number of free and low cost or moderate cost services. Some of those include the WIC program, which is Women, Infants, and Children. And that program supplies supplemental food, nutrition education, access to dietitian, breastfeeding support, and healthcare referrals, among a list of other things. Library, Arts, and History. They have free library cards and access to print and electronic resources, English language conversation groups, Wi-Fi hotspots available. They also have a number of educational courses that they provide for adults and teens. And then Parks, Rec, and Senior Services. They offer recreational programs for youth and adults and seniors. The Recreation Service Division offers reduced fee program for low-income families who qualify. Residents who qualify will also be able to purchase general daily admission at either the Alberta Recreation Center or the Broomfield Community Center at a 50% fee reduction. And additionally, Broomfield provides Easy Ride to seniors that are 60 plus and adults with disabilities. I think in the memo, based on some of the emails and comments, there was some confusion around additional costs. What I'm referring to tonight is what we already provide, things that would not cost us more because we're not adding service. These are the things that everybody already has the ability to access. Again, dependent on eligibility in some cases. And then last slide, Jake. So support for Afghan refugees, going back to the beginning, the 4 things that were identified: mental health. We do have our programs from Parks, Rec, and Senior Services, the library, as I talked about earlier, and then behavioral health services are offered through 2 community mental health centers. Again, Mental Health Partners and Community Read Center, as well as many private providers in or near Broomfield. Transportation, we have Flex Ride options. Flex Ride offers curbside services available to Broomfield residents, employees, and visitors. Flex Ride is available to everybody. There's no ridership restrictions on age or ability. And then RTD also provides live pass discounts. This is a low-income pass program using the Colorado Peak system, the same system you would apply for benefits through my department on. And then English language learning support. Again, the Broomfield Workforce Center has some referrals. I wouldn't say that we offer that service directly in our building, but we definitely can refer out for that service. And then there are some other services available through the Broomfield Library. In addition, the Colorado Refugee Services Program has a number of reference materials on their website, and they identify Emily Griffith, the Boulder Valley Literacy Program, the Jeffco Schools Literacy Program, Focus Points Family Resource Center, and we also now have a local nonprofit, Coal Creek, that provides English as a second language. So all of those providers have programs or resources for English as a second language. And then Resettlement Agency Connections, the Afghan Resource Center, they're providing all kinds of additional support for arriving Afghans to the United States. Information is provided in English, Dari, and Pashto. I think I pronounced that right. I'm looking at Councilmember Henkel. Again, for services and benefits, immigration information, jobs, daily life help, American culture, U.S. law, money, health, and education. And then through the U.S., I wrote that down here somewhere, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. There's also a program called Hello, USA Hello. Hello Find is an app that users can connect with to find local services in addition to what I've provided here. And then again, I thought interesting in the Afghan welcome packet, they did talk about Facebook and being able to identify with other groups or folks that are having the same issues, or at least networking to find support for all populations. And that concludes my informational presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Casey. We're going to go to council questions and comments next. And first we have Councilmember Pickle.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Casey, for your presentation. And I know that this is a collaboration between a lot of different, areas and entities. And so I just really appreciate your presentation tonight and your deep dive in how we support our Afghan evacuees. Knowing that we can have Ukraine refugees as well, this shines a light on so much we've done and more that we can do. I wanted to quickly answer a question, though, of a person who asked me to recuse myself, and I will not. I am doing my job representing my constituents, and I do not financially benefit from these programs. To those who wrote in support of our refugees, I wanted to thank you for supporting these families who have lost so much. As many of you can see, these families rely very heavily on volunteers and nonprofits. And as we look at this holistically, as a reminder, this population does not know the language. They've lost family support nearby. They've lost their homes, jobs, bank accounts. They don't have insurance to help get them back on their feet. And also, it's like COVID, an emergency status that is unique. Hence why we are here talking about it before our retreat. Many of you are aware of the Broomfield Afghan Evacuee Task Force. It's a volunteer group that has a social worker, ESL director, community engagement leader, volunteer coordinator, and a household goods coordinator and fundraising director as well, that are tied to the Broomfield Community Foundation. It's essentially an extension of Lutheran Family Services. And while currently over $18,000 was raised for the 7 families we have in Broomfield, to include people, actually there's 8 now, another one came this week, I apologize. To include people on all sides of the political spectrum who have donated. Actually, one of my biggest donators is actually made sure that everyone knew he did not vote for me. But he is one of our biggest proponents for these Afghan evacuees. And while FISH and our federal government and Lutheran Family Services is helping with housing, we cannot leave our nonprofits and volunteers to help resettle some of our most hurting residents. As our volunteers and nonprofits help resettle these residents, we must understand what has happened with these families. They often don't have a social security card for over a month, no checking accounts, little to no family nearby, no transportation, and are reliant on nonprofits and co-sponsors. But they do have those that desire to belong here, and it is my hope that we assist in this bond and belonging. And I am thankful it fits in our diversity, equity, access, and inclusion goal we have already established. Here are some things that the federal and state governments do provide, like you said, housing. They do provide 3 to 6 months, depending on family size, either on a military base or an undisclosed hotel. Temporary phones for 3 months, and they're also helping with legislation, helping apply for asylum, which hoping to make it easier for people to apply for asylum. The nonprofits right now are tasked with housing gap resources. Lutheran Family Services actually applauded our city and county affordable housing ordinance and is asking other surrounding counties to follow, our lead alongside us. They do provide some limited transportation for RTD. They do provide like a small little packet of bus passes, but that is limited. They provide food, fundraising for adult classes and other things that Medicaid does not fund. They also provide volunteer training, phones, and temporary phone plans, school enrollment, some ESL training, but it's in Denver mostly. And then our schools provide some mental health assistance for small groups. Some of our families are together and the kids get to talk in their schools. It's actually pretty neat. And they get to bond. ESL for the children during the school year. City and county Medicaid, I would like to applaud Broomfield. We are the fastest county that Lutheran Family Services has worked with in this area. Workforce assistance, our workforce has actually helped get one of our evacuees the highest paying job in the state for any evacuee. This is something to be very proud of. Our EBT and food assistance. Here are 3 things that we're missing though, and I do want to add on to the fact that we do sort of task out for our ESL classes, and I really want to say that needs to change. In-person ESL classes, and not just conversation classes, not just parsing out to say go to Denver or just do all online. The volunteer task force has an ESL task force director from Iran who speaks Farsi and has talked to the families in Broomfield in need. And she said that a big part of mental health for their culture is actually talking in person and having those activities for the families. That actually helps their mental health. So while they actually might not actually see a mental health expert, they enjoy the ESL classes together. Some of this can be online, but I think a good chunk of it needs to be in person with others. Currently, Douglas County Libraries does offer ESL classes. We are currently about to start intercambio courses in April, but we have no location and we are heavily reliant on volunteers. I know we offer education classes and other classes at our workforce center, and I have been there with our GED courses are going on. But for example, 2 of our young adult evacuees are in their 20s. I've lost my place here, I apologize. Who lost their father in the Kabul blast. They had to quit the GED course because they didn't understand the class. So they said they need ESL assistance before they can even get their GED.
Councilman Hinkle, can you wrap up though? You've passed your 5 minutes.
I could, or I could add on to the very end. I think I'm gonna take 3 more minutes.
Okay, on the second round then?
No, I can do that.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so any council members want to go next? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. And, a big thank you to staff for putting all the work in on the preparation for the study session and this memo. I really appreciate all the programs that Broomfield provides to our residents. And, it really culminates in this memo that's been provided to council. I've also seen a lot of emails to this effect that residents are surprised of all the programs that are provided to residents. And I mean, this just goes to highlight, the platinum level services that our Broomfield residents get. We'll be talking about budget later this week. With that aside, each of these emails and phone calls that I've received show that our community of Broomfield supports and welcomes refugees and their resettlement to Broomfield. And I can't be any more proud of our community for their willingness to do this, their ability to help, our new Afghan residents or our new Broomfield residents from Afghanistan. When this was first called to council's attention by some residents, they focused a lot on recreation. And that was a piece that I wasn't as familiar with, was the reduced rate at our recreation centers for all low-income residents. And, this was something that I didn't know the details of, and now I know a little bit more. But I see this as something that could assist our Afghan refugees. The one question I have around that, because I do think that this was a big piece of some residents' calls for council, is the financial documents that are needed to prove the low income status. Is that going to be an extra burden for our Afghan residents to prove and to provide? I didn't know if that's already been something that staff has dealt with.
Councilmember Schaaf, thanks for the question. This is Dan Casey, Director of Human Services. I will have Clay Shuck answer the question specifically the Recreation Center, but I know that in our Human Services benefits delivery, we are actually operating under different memos that allow for like citizenship as a requirement has been waived based on the status of their humanitarian parole. Most of the programs, like I said earlier, that are through ORR, they're eligible for those programs. So if they could demonstrate income in any way, I would assume that would make them eligible as well, but I don't want to speak for Director Shuck.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. It just, I guess that I would, as residents are looking into that, I mean, and this is really for all residents, again, is my hope is that the providing documents to prove kind of low income isn't necessarily something that's an additional burden, especially when there's a lot that can be provided to show that low income status. And I know that that's going to have different implications in human services as it's going to have in recreation services. But I trust that staff is going to work through these issues diligently, provide as much support as they can, because ultimately, that's what Broomfield staff does is really help all of our residents. I think the in-person ESL programs could be a missing piece to this. I'm curious if we've looked at where these ESL classes are being taught in Broomfield. And I guess I would also say that, these ESL classes aren't just for Afghan residents, but they're for all ESL learners. And this is something that, I see on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, the need for good ESL classes. And I wonder if this is a piece that we do have a gap in all of our services here on Broomfield. So if staff could talk to about that.
Councilmember Schaaf, it's Abby. Good to see you this evening virtually. So we do have a couple things just from the library perspective. They do offer their English conversation group twice a week. It's free, it's in person. So that is for ESL classes, it's for English as a second language learners. Also, Catherine was telling me a little bit about intercambio. There is a cost to that one. It's not something the library can offer for free, but it is an option for folks that kind of want that interactive, but it's more online. And then also from a library, like the research database perspective, things that we do have for free through their library card. They can use Pronunciator. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Pronunciator. They also have Gale courses in Udemy who offer online ESL classes as well. And I also want to kind of reiterate to your point, Councilmember Schaaf, the library, and I'm biased, right, a little bit, but the library is a great starting place for folks because the requirement for if you don't have mail coming in yet or something with your address on it, the library works a lot with folks that are experiencing homelessness as well. So they're flexible. They'll get you that library card and get them set up so that way they can start using some of those resources or start coming to the programs. You can come to the programs without a library card. So I did want to just put a shout out to the library for that. It is a very welcoming space and it's a lot easier to get a library card than I'm sure it's to get some of the other resources just because there are documents that are required. Hopefully that helps.
Well, no truer marketing of a library than what you just said. The library is a great starting point for folks. I 100% agree. So I'm glad to hear that there are some ESL programs, both online as well as the conversation groups. And so that may fill some of that. Intercambio, I used to work with them in Boulder, phenomenal organization, a great ESL program set up through them. It would be, I don't know what their fee is. I do know their fees when I worked with them were minimal and small. So a phenomenal organization, phenomenal nonprofit. So glad to see that there are some services, that concern ESL learning. I would say too, as as we're looking at kind of this was a resident emailed about this, but if we're not offering Afghan cultural programming, this would be a great thing to add to our cultural awareness of our newest neighbors and their experiences. So this is something that I think our residents of Broomfield have asked. So not necessarily services for our Afghan refugees, but for our Broomfield services or Broomfield other Broomfield residences is really kind of understanding, and becoming more culturally aware. So I don't know if that's a program that Cultural Affairs can offer or library can offer. And then the last question that I have is regarding revenues that Broomfield might have received. So is Broomfield receiving any state or federal dollars to assist Afghan refugees?
No. Other than, so again, it's the direct program offering, Councilmember Schaaf. So all of those state and federal programs that Mr. Casey had mentioned, those are offered in every city and county, and really it's maximizing the number of Afghan refugees, God forbid, and unfortunately, any of the additional refugees that may be coming. So offsetting or reimbursements are not part of that overall package. So outside of the state and federal and existing programs that we have right now for all residents. Those would be at additional costs that Broomfield would pick up, whether it's programming and or staffing.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that there aren't any offsetting or reimbursements being made from the state or federal government. So thank you again to staff for your work on putting this together. It's great to see the holistic level of services that we offer to all Broomfield residents. And I believe that with the nonprofits that we currently have, the community at large in Broomfield and the programs that are being offered by the city and county of Broomfield, that we've really ensured that there aren't any holes that would be made that could potentially for our Afghans to slip through. So thank you.
All right, I was gonna play a song and play you off. Thanks, Councilmember Schaaf. Next is Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually want to just echo, Councilmember Schaaf said a lot of what I wanted to say as far as just thank you to staff and all that you do to provide services to everyone. As someone who grew up using these services, I know firsthand how important it is to that our residents feel a part of the community. And I had fortunate, privilege to be born in the United States and not have to deal with, war torn country. And I can't even imagine what the Afghan refugees are going through. I had one specific question on parks. I know that we offer 50% reduction for rec center passes, and I'm assuming that includes the bay during the summertime as well.
Thank you. Clay Shuck, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Actually, the bay is not included in that. So we don't do passes. We do daily admission drops at the Broomfield Community Center and at the Boulder Recreation Center. So within our reduced rate program, we do have some programs that we do not have or we do not reduce the rate on, and the bay is one of them.
Okay. So one thing I would say here, and something I intend to bring forward at some point in the future, is I would like to explore at what it looks like and what it costs to offer free parks, Boulder to rec passes bay to low-income residents in general. But what would that be to just do that for the Afghan refugees to start with? Do we have any idea of what that would cost in the revenue?
We do a park, not a park pass, but a recreation pass is about $1,000 per family. And the bay for Clay, you want to do a non-residential and residential for the day?
Yeah, so we have an all-inclusive pass now that includes all. Once we rebuilt the Broomfield Community Center, it's an all-inclusive pass, includes the bay. So our drop-in resident rate is, it's on that page. For a youth, 4 to 17 is $3.50, an adult is $5, and 60 plus is $4 for a non-resident. A youth is $6.25, an adult is $7.75, and 60 plus is $6.25. So currently, how we have it set up is with the reduced rate program, they would get half of the drop-in rate. So instead of $3.50, it'd be $1.75 for a youth 4 to 17.
Okay, so I guess the question is more like, what will it cost the city as far as additional manpower staffing to offer that to the Afghan refugees free of charge? Obviously, I understand that there's an offset of difference between offset of cost, offset of fees that we would get versus what it actually would cost.
It's a little difficult to answer the question without knowing how many people we'd be offsetting the passes for. So let's say we did 10 families of 5 people. We would probably be somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000 that we would have to offset those costs.
Okay, thank you. That's informative. That's really the only question I had specifically. And from my perspective, I think that I would like to see us move forward with something along those lines. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members? Questions or comments? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my only question that I just thought of, since I like to do transportation things in my free time, Would these residents have access to the transportation services that Broomfield offers with our power and cutaway buses we have?
The easy ride, Mr. Shuck.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. They would not. That is a grant funded program that is specifically for 60+. So outside of that, we don't do any transportation except for individuals with a disability. And that's really due to a federal mandate. We cannot deny service in that area.
Okay. I just wanted to double check on that for my clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
One question, we've had a night, appreciate the staff's report detailing all the various services we provide. I think the question for me is how well those, I think a number of us were not aware of income-based fees for the recreation center, for example. And so I'm curious if there's any extra effort or special effort made to make all residents who are eligible aware of some of these lower income or lower fee costs that are available to them.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Cohen. We did have it on our website until about the end of 2020. We took it down because we're currently re-looking at this program and making sure that it still fits. We're still offering the right programs. We're still doing the right fee reduction. The other reason we did it is that we were having an issue with our financial system and how it was accounting for it. So we're trying to resolve those two things. That's why we took it down. They can still come in, they can still fill out a packet, and we will still work through getting in the reduced rate discount for a family, any low income family that qualifies.
I guess my thought going forward is that, people who are in poverty or in lower income typically don't have Wi-Fi, may not have access to websites, and it takes a special effort to do outreach to those at the lower echelons of income. And so I think it sounds like we have tremendous services. I'd be curious as to what our penetration rate is, or are these services reaching people who could most benefit from them? And there might require a special effort, however, to do outreach in those communities, make sure they can take advantage of all the programs that the residents are making available to them, which is great. One other comment I would make going forward, Councilmember Hinkle has more to talk about in the next round. I would feel more comfortable, quite honestly, if we talked about refugees in general. I know the Afghans are a special particular case because of the situation in Afghanistan and how they're coming to us, because they were helping our military in Afghan during our 20-year occupation, and their lives would have been at grave danger if they hadn't come here. But having spent the day dealing with a student at my university whose family's from Poland, whose cousin just got across the border out of Ukraine, I also think of all the refugees here from Latin America who are escaping gangs that would steal their children and kill them if they don't hand their children over, and tyrants on this continent. There's a whole range of refugees who are here in the same circumstances. And unfortunately, our history is not great in how we treated immigrants here. So I would feel comfortable we looked at the principle going forward is we're looking at how we make services available. We look at all immigrants, all refugees, all those who are at a low level of income and need maybe a special assistance to access the services we offer.
Mayor, if I may. Thank you, Councilmember Cohen. And actually, that's exactly when we were preparing this memo, how we went at it rather than an individual population. So from a comprehensive view, and it kind of incorporates Councilmember Marsh Holshan's pursuit of what is that dollar amount and dollar figure. We need to kind of start at the beginning, which is recreation is a cost recovery model. Historically, it's cost recovery. So it never pays for itself. We're about 60% of cost recovery on 100% of those services. So it's so if we go up to 30,000 feet, when Councilmember Schaaf was saying the platinum level services, those platinum level services continue to become exponentially more important and more expensive. And so when we're looking at subsidizing from an already cost recovery that we're already subsidizing, it gets back to Councilmember Cohen's question of the outreach and engagement. So anecdotally, we can look at our human services population that receives any one of the services, not even a complete services. But if we start there, that's kind of the basis. And so I think we're at 7% higher. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Manager Hoffman. Right now, unduplicated count of services for Broomfield is about 7,200 individuals, so we're about 10%.
So about 10% of the population of the 75,000. So again, that gets back, Councilmember Marsh-Wolshin, to kind of activating what the one pot is, which is additional subsidizing. The number that we're looking at, again, and that's the common denominator and not individual refugees. And then kind of shoring up what that methodology looks like for the outreach and engagement piece. I know I always come back to the finances. It's just so top of mind.
Just to add on to that, I think my interest was, I don't know if we've done this, you may have already done this work, but have we gone out and talked to the folks of this who are in these income levels personally and said, are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? Are you aware of all these different options that are available to you? Because it's hard work being poor. We don't have time to search these things out and find all the resources that are available to you. And this partly comes from my experience at Regis with the homeless facility we have. They brought the services to them because they otherwise would never access it because they don't have transportation, they don't have computers, and the services are there,
sure,
but they couldn't access them until the services really brought to them because it just was too much for them to manage. And I think that's the case for family members who are, if you're working 3 jobs, you don't have time to get on a website or stop at a rec center and say, and have the guts to go up and ask. And I think I think it's probably difficult to prove how poor you are in a sense. It's certainly not something anybody wants to do. And so I'm curious, I think that would be my focus is how do we make it amenable and acceptable and easy for these people to access the services we're providing.
Absolutely. And are there gaps in the outreach engagement? Absolutely there are. I think the start from the council memo tonight indicating the services that are there is the start of kind of what that platform looks like. Continuing to engage human services, but also all of the outreach and engagement that public health does is a very different touch of that population. In addition to what the library does, it's a very different population, a very different touch points. And what really allows for the modicum and collaboration of services is all of our nonprofits. So again, it's not just the government of CCOB responsibility and outreach and engagement pieces. It's that deeper collaboration between all of our nonprofits, our faith-based communities. Your point is well taken about what that next step is for and reducing that stigma, I think, is essentially what you're saying, right? And that's why, back to Councilmember Schaaf's point, that the library really provides that, and we saw it so much during COVID. It's different than walking into human services. You're there under a different take. And just real quickly too, wanted to add that Broomfield's always had the program where it's like read to swim. So the kids can earn a bay pass if they sign up at the library. And of course, English is a second language. I know that wouldn't apply to the refugee population per se, but certainly for the other folks that are here, regardless of income level, they can earn those passes through the summer reading program.
I didn't know about that. That's cool. All right, is that all, Councilmember? Any other first round comments from council? I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, Councilmember Lynn.
Yes, I just wanted to add just a few things. I having worked with, led as faith-based groups in the 90s, sponsor 3 Bosnian refugee families. I really wanted to say I appreciate the efforts of the volunteers in Broomfield. I understand what is involved, and there are gaps in the federal program, and just there's a lot of help that ESL learners need to even qualify and for the resources. So I appreciate all the efforts of the volunteers in Broomfield for the Afghan refugees. I also understand all of the services that we have available in Broomfield, and I tend to lean towards providing those based on an income qualification instead of offering additional services, knowing that will hit the population that in Broomfield that needs those services the most. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further, I'll go back to Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you. And I don't mean to pontificate up here, I apologize, but I get very passionate, and I even think that we're having this conversation and we have to do a lot of research on it. Tells us we have some work to do in making sure that our refugee population does need the information at their fingertips. Going back to the ESL and talking about, the kids that said, I can't even get my GED without learning English first. We also have a gap in ESL for help for kids in the summer. Our volunteers use the total physical response method, which combines vocabulary instruction with bodily movements, and it creates a fun and unique educational instruction style. These puppets, rewards, and things that are in person for the kids. And I feel like that's really important. So I believe that we can also use this for other populations in Broomfield as well. And perhaps we can have a public-private partnership here, but I really do think that we need more than just conversation time. We need more actual structure, curriculum, so they can see themselves moving through a program, and also in-person accessibility. When we talk about transportation, for the first time ever, I called FlexRide today. And they said, we require 24 advance notice, and on our website, it does not reflect that. So either we need to make sure that we're telling our Afghan families that, because one of them called a few weeks ago and they said, no, they said online that I could get within 10 minutes. And then they said, no, I can't get you today. And so they didn't understand that it's best to have a 24-hour, notice. So I think we need to have that on our website. And this is a greater conversation, I realize, but the only available translation is Spanish, and FlexRide doesn't extend north of 144th. And so I just don't know how we're being accessible for these families. So this is what I'm imagining when I'm calling FlexRide. I'm imagining I'm a female at home, my husband's at work, I don't speak English, and I'm trying to get to the grocery store and medical appointments for me and my children, and I don't know how to access that transportation. Accessibility to recreation. Our families have gone to the rec center with their passports and we're charged out of county rates. Is that something we need to be aware of?
That's just your time.
Again, seriously? Fudge nuggets. Anyone have donate time?
How much longer?
It's like 5 sentences, y'all. Okay. I do think that we need to make it more accessible for them. I don't think that we necessarily need $1,000 a year pass. I think we can do like a 3-month, kind of like Lutheran Family Services. They say, okay, you get 3 to 6 months and then you're on your own. I don't think we need $1,000, passes for the families. But I do think a 3-month either free or included discount, and making sure they don't always have to show their ID every time they come in. I think that's really disheartening and demoralizing to show that they're humanitarian parole or on humanitarian parole. I just could not find any online rates or application for cheaper rates. Of course, we've talked about that. But I will be looking for more online access for these families who qualify. And I do think we need more communication just between our human services and our rec centers as well, so that when they go in for Medicaid, they know this information. And I'm hopeful that we can actually get everything in one spot for these families as well, so they don't have to search in different parts of our websites. And I'm done.
Thank you, Councilmember Hengel. Councilmember Marshall.
I just had a couple more questions. Director Casey, you said 7,200 unduplicated residents that have services. And I guess the question is, how many of those are families and children?
I was pulling up the EVT memo that you're gonna see on the 29th, sneak peek. It's actually, now I lost it. It was, the fourth quarter closed, so we had an accurate number for all of 2021. It was 7,700 households. I can't tell you off the top of my head without doing a little bit of research how many of those have children, but we can't get that information for you.
And the other question that I have is related to that is, if they can get the rec center pass currently, or rec center drop-in rate of 50%, is that something that Human Services is doing when they apply for SNAP or Medicaid or TANF or whatever they're doing? And if you don't, is that something we could do? Like, here's your SNAP benefits, so now we're going to give you a pass that says you can go to the rec center for 50% off every day.
Yeah, I think that's something that Director Shuck and I can definitely talk about. I have written some notes here about a voucher process, similar like a unhoused shower voucher. We could provide that at the time that they're eligible for benefits, and that could be for anybody that's eligible for our benefits. And I do want to clarify for the record, the 7,700 unduplicated households, that would be all services. That's not just our public assistance, that's child welfare, workforce, all of the services that we provide.
Thank you. I guess what I was saying was, what you were just saying too, that providing the service at the same time kind of goes to what Councilmember Cohen was saying about, how they find out about it and what they need. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstedt?
Thank you, Mayor. I waited on my comments. So I wanted to hear the rest of what Councilmember Henkel had to say, because she really has thrown herself into this work these last few months. And I just wanted to start by thanking her for her huge heart and moving this forward, because it really is a conversation that I don't think's ever happened up here. I know a few years ago, we signed a letter welcoming refugees into this community. And I think this is an issue, watching what's going on in Ukraine and around the world, this is an issue we're going to keep facing. So I think it was a needed request, and it's a very unique population with very unique needs. So I definitely support doing whatever we can to make sure that the document piece is resolved, because if people who don't have the necessary document, it's hard, and whatever we need to do administratively to make that work while being able to meet grant needs and the various pieces, I think we need to do that. So in terms of the discounts, I think the voucher when they show up is a great idea. Having people have to wait to receive those benefits, it's a very unique population, so they should be able to access all of these services as soon as possible. And in terms of ensuring that all of qualified residents can receive those services, I think we need to make sure there's equity there for whatever legal reasons and all the various reasons, but ensuring that our refugee community has timely access to those services is definitely my priority. So I don't know what more specifics I can give right now after being kind of overwhelmed reading all the things that we do. It's really amazing. But I think language accessibility and accessibility for people who might not have the required documents is definitely a great place to start. So that's all I have right now. But thank you for the request and for the overwhelming amount of information to read over the weekend. It really was heartwarming to see all the things that Broomfield is doing. But as always, there's things we can do better. So I look forward to seeing what's next. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Second round. Well, I do agree, and I am grateful for our team and the services they do supply to our residents and our new residents. I wonder, because Broomfield really wasn't set up for public transit. It seems to me the transportation is a big deal, that they should try to place these folks closer to public transit and transit corridors so that they have more freedom to access all the things, because we all know this is a place where you need a car. And those are hard to come by. So I do love your heart, Councilmember Henkel, and we all want to help our new neighbors and the neighbors to come. Broomfield is a welcoming and inclusive place. And I'm grateful for you. So that wraps up this item. And thank you guys. We're going to move on. Our final study session item this evening is an update from Broomfield's Police Chief, Anaya Hempelman. I'll ask Chief Hempelman to begin the update. Chief, how's it sound, Chief? Do you wake up and go, wait, I'm the chief?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Anaya Hempelman, your new Chief of Police. I was promoted from Deputy Chief on January 12th of this year, after Chief Prager retired. We have been quite busy in the police department for the last several weeks, and we recently promoted 10 backfill vacancies. One of these promotions, however, was for our newly created Deputy Chief position. I collaborated with our City Manager Hoffman, and we realized the needs for our community and agreed that it was time to add a third Deputy Chief to the police department. So tonight I am excited to introduce our three new, actually one of them is, a lot of you know, Deputy Chief Mike Clement. So I'm excited to introduce each one of them to you. Next slide, please. Deputy Chief Mike Clement is way back there. I think he's probably a familiar face. And our other two new deputy chiefs are probably familiar faces as well, as they used to be our previous commanders and were promoted just last week. Deputy Chief Roger Plunkett and Deputy Chief Mark Goodell. Next slide, please. So this is our organizational chart. One of the things that we looked at, we have 248 employees in the police department. So we looked at span of control, we looked at workload, and we realized that we are a large enough city that it was time to add this third deputy chief. We have the city and county facilities, we have the detention facility, and we realized the importance of this third position. So Deputy Chief Plunkett, he's on the left, he is the field operations. So what that means is he has all the uniformed officers that you see on the road: patrol, traffic, animal services, school resource officers. In the middle there is Deputy Chief Mike Clement, and he has investigations, our technical services, which is dispatch and records, property and evidence, civil and court security. And then lastly, Deputy Chief Goodell, he oversees training, professional standards, background investigations for hiring, as well as our CCW concealed weapons permits, and then the detention facility. So that's the breakout of our new organizational chart. Next slide, please. So what we've done over the last few years, we don't have all night, so I did a quick short summary. We worked through the pandemic, which was very unique. A lot of you were part of that. And we in 2019 were very blessed to get 10 new police officer positions. In 2020, when we started implementing that budget, that's when the pandemic hit. So we halted for a little bit, trying to figure out what our next steps were. And we realized the importance of required staffing. We then continued, we had conversations, and we decided that we were going to continue the hiring in 2020 of those 10 police officers. And between 2020 and 2021, we were fully staffed. I'm very proud of this because I looked at the local police departments, and especially in this North Metro area, they're not fully staffed. Some of them 30, 40 resources down. Pardon me. So we look at recruiting and hiring our police officers. I know a lot of you have heard this, but it's critical. It takes 9 to 12 to 15 months from the time that they put their application in to actually being fully ready to go, to hit the road and be solo as a police officer. So when we look at the critical component of hiring these resources, this is why we're so proud of our rate of fully staffed. When we look at recruitment efforts, we ensure that our hiring applicants from diverse backgrounds, and they're reflective of our community. We just had these conversations previously on the bilingual. We make sure that many of our officers are bilingual. We just hired a great deal of women. And I think that this is something that we should look at in the future of our police department, and we will continue to work on. Our really creative focus has been on crime prevention and public education, and that's ultimately our highest priority. We look at our mental health co-responder program. Broomfield is very unique. Many departments are reacting to not having this program. We've had our co-responder program now for 4 years. And then, of course, we continue to emphasize the importance of not only the mental health of our community, but the mental health of our police officers. I have a saying that if our officers are well, that's going to translate to our community, and they're going to handle situations much better if they're well and mentally well. We really focused this last year, and I'm going to get more into this when I talk about our legislation. We really focused on our advanced training of our police officers. Coming out of police reform, one of the biggest focuses is DEAI training, implicit bias training, which is every biases that we all have that we need to make sure when we are in communication or contact with our community that those biases are not coming through. And what we did when we did the implicit bias trainings, we not only brought trainers in, we sent our officers to be trained the trainers so that as we hire and recruit additional officers, that training continues, so we keep teaching that. And then, of course, I know I'm talking kind of faster, the use of force. And I'm going to get into more of this and the importance of this. There's new legislation that I'll talk about, but there's a duty to intervene now that's mandated. When I look at now, if we unholster our weapon, if we unholster our taser, if we point our weapon at someone, every single time we take this action, we have to report it, and we have to report it to the state every single time. And then lastly, de-escalation. We use a force continuum of de-escalation that's called procedural justice in a LEAD program. Listen and explain with equity and dignity. We make sure that every single one of our officers attends this training and really applies that to every contact when they're out in the community. Lastly, what I call comprehensive reporting is critical. So to give an explanation what I mean by this, when an officer uses force, every single time that force is taken, a supervisor responds to the scene, investigates by interviewing the person that we use force against, interviews the officer. It then gets evaluated and reviewed by that sergeant's commander, the deputy chief, and myself every single time. This is the biggest thing about when we do this review. We not only look at it to say, what did they do right or wrong and give a true review, but we really look at it from a component of what training are we providing? Am I seeing the same training from this, am I seeing the same action from an officer continually that maybe is not against policy, but is something that we're training that we shouldn't be training? So we look at that critical eye, not just from a right or wrong, but what are next steps that we need to change to make sure that we're doing what we need to for our community members. Next slide, please. So community-oriented approach. I think this is something that we are very proud of in Broomfield. We have a model where the community is supported by our officers, and we want to ensure a proactive model asking the community to be the eyes and ears of what is happening in the community. Most community programs, when COVID hit, they were canceled. Slowly, we started bringing those back. We now have National Night came back out. We have the Teen Academy, which is a really fun thing for the teens for the week. They get to spend at the police department and learn what a police officer's job is. And Citizens Academy, which we now call Broomfield Inside Academy, we were able to bring back. We did a modified version last year, but this year we're going to do the full program. We continue the school events and tours, which is near and dear. It's so great to see the little kiddos come into the police department and light up when they see a police car or they see a badge and they get to talk to the officers. So we've resumed those programs. We did something really neat last year. We did a Faith in Blue weekend, which was a national program where we actually stopped in local homes of faith, and we just meet with the parishioners and just have discussions. And it went really well this weekend. We had so many of our local worship homes. And then we did a police department blood drive. And lastly, everything that's near and dear to us, we were able to participate and be part of Broomfield Days. So that's something that we're very proactive in our community as a law enforcement agency. And part of the thing I want to share is that every time that we hire a police officer, our standard is that we make sure that The standard of what we want that to look like is trained on day one. And I'll get more into that in the next slide, please. So new legislation, I think many of you heard about our new legislation that came into effect, very top on there, 20-217. It was the Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Bill. This was a legislation that really impacted law enforcement, but yet we have been able to maintain. I'll get into a little bit of what this means. This really came out of the George Floyd death, and it was a demand for changes to law enforcement. And when we look at the bill, that we really focused on the significant requirements. For example, body-worn camera. We've had body-worn cameras here in Broomfield for 4 years, but this law mandated, I think it's this year that it's got to come into effect, even though that passed in 2020. So a lot of police departments are now reacting to getting body-worn cameras and trying to figure out how to work those. Yet we've been working on those and have had those for 4 years. The biggest thing that I see with the body-worn camera is that we have to remember to turn them on. So I'm going to get into a little bit about the importance of that in the future. The other thing in the Senate bill is that now, if there's a critical incident, we may have to do a quick release of videos, and we have time frames where those have to be met and they do have to be released. And one of the things that I look at when I look at this legislation is they really wanted us to prevent profiling. So now it's required that officers have a legal basis when they need to contact any individual. So I'm going to give you an example of that. If you have someone call the dispatch at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, there's a suspicious vehicle parked outside my home. And the question is, why are they suspicious? They may say, well, they're just parked in front of my home. I've never seen this individual before. I've never seen this car before. Legally, that is not by law a reason to contact an individual. If they're illegally parked, they're not blocking the driveway, and they're not doing anything wrong. So we really have to focus on what is the contact, which is now that by definition, we have to be very careful about that. So what we try to do is teach our officers to say, yes, you cannot make that contact, but can you be proactive to the community and just drive by so that there maybe is a deterrence. So if someone was going to commit a crime, that there's a deterrence to say, okay, I see a police officer, and may change the behavior. The other thing is on contacts. When I say that we have to document every single time that we make a contact. If it's self-initiated by a police officer, we have to do a log, and we have to document it every single time. We have to provide why did we make the contact and what are the demographics of the individual that we contacted. Then there's new civil liability that came into for officers, and there's a potential for officers to lose their post certification. This is interesting because we look at if an officer was terminated in another police department, we don't want to hire him. So this was something that I think was very beneficial to law enforcement agencies when we look at recruiting and hiring. The next House bill was the cleanup bill. So when I talked about the contact, it was a little bit confusing for officers because that previous bill was passed in, I believe it was 9 days, as opposed to the sometimes 120 days. When you look at this, we said, when should we document this contact? For example, if you have a domestic violence incident and you contact a neighbor who may be a witness, is that now a self-initiated contact where I need to do a form, or is that part of the original call of someone calling in? So the House bill, that's just an example of the cleanup bill, really provided a guidance to law enforcement to say, this is when you should do the contact form, and this is the why behind it. The data collection requirements, though, they added even more data collection for that. But the big thing that came out of it is right when that law came into effect, we started doing the data collection, but we had all this collection and we didn't know what to do with it. Then what happened was the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice created a website and information where we can now enter that data right to them, and they're going to decipher what is the data, how does this look, and how is this organization doing when they make these contacts. And the last one is a big one for this year. This one's really interesting. It's 304 pages. A lot of the laws came into effect, are in effect today. So we're still trying to figure out what this looks like. This is a misdemeanor reform bill. It changes a lot of the criminal charges that were a felony to misdemeanor now. For example, second-degree criminal trespass. If someone breaks into your car, it used to be a felony, that's now a misdemeanor. Motor vehicle theft, depending on the value of your car, that's no longer a felony, it could be a misdemeanor. This is impactful for our officers because they need to understand when they can and cannot make an arrest versus writing summons or making a book and release. So this one there's going to be more to come on this one. It's going to be very impactful in the future. And I'm sure you're hearing a lot about the reform laws and how this is going to affect future crimes. So kind of in conclusion to this, in response to this legislation, what we've done is we've ensured that our officers are equipped and they're trained. I think this is critical. When I talk about the body worn cameras, one of the things that we'll be looking at this year that we plan on for the budget is to look at, so now we have to have those cameras on. It's assumed that you intentionally did not turn it on if they're not on when something critical happens. This is critical because what we don't want is for an officer to make a decision on a serious situation, deadly force situation. Do I grab my gun or do I turn on my camera? So what we've done is we're budgeting for the future of as soon as you unholster this weapon, as soon as you unholster your taser, that camera kicks on automatically. So that's the future of our body worn cameras. We've also updated policy. When I told you there's 304 pages of this new reform, that also goes along with updating policy, updating training. We work very closely with our city attorneys and our district attorney to make sure that when these laws go in effect, we have legal update to make sure that our officers are prepared and they're educated and they're trained so that they can apply all the current laws and policies. So we train a lot at the police department, a lot, and it's critical to what we do every day. So we continue to train on force, and de-escalation. The bias-free policing that I talked about is critical. When I talk about de-escalation and the importance of talking to someone and defusing the situation, it's critical for each one of us as officers each and every day. So we continue to work closely with our city attorney as I spoke, and we'll continue to monitor legislation. It'll be interesting in the future how this impacts us. We really don't know when these legislations get passed, how they're going to impact our community for about 3 to 5 years. So that very first one, we're 2 years into it. We're still seeing some changes from it. So we'll see the impacts more and more as we go through. Next slide, please. And finally, wrong way. Give me just a second. And finally, the difficult conversation of crime. I know everyone watches the news and you see the things that you hear and you're concerned. And I look at, so I pulled a little bit of stats, and I wanted to point these out because we've seen an increase in some property crimes in Broomfield. However, our violent crimes have remained relatively low. In 2019, we had motor vehicle theft increased by 174%, and criminal trespass has increased by 53% in Broomfield. Our neighboring communities have double and triple those percentages of the amount of crime that they have. However, as I mentioned, violent crimes, including murder, sex offense, aggravated assault, and robbery, have only increased by less than 6%. In fact, I just saw this morning and it was really enlightening to me. Our serious assaults have actually decreased since 2019. That is so unusual compared to other jurisdictions that border us or even in Colorado. So I really want to say the message that Broomfield is a very safe place to live. It's a very safe community. We're going to continue to work with our community, get creative ways to address crime. I have my new team together now. We've actually promoted a total of 10, I mentioned 10 new positions. And I think with the future of the leadership and what we have to look at, it's going to be a lot of work, and that's what we're going to be focusing on this year. Next slide, please. So this is really an exciting time for the police department. As I talked about the promotions, it's something that I think will have a lot of work ahead. The new leadership team I know is excited. We have our first, the new sergeants group is going to meet on Thursday this week. And we're really going to talk about what the future looks like for Broomfield and how we can continue to build the great relationships with our community, with you all, and with our city manager. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you so much, Chief Eppelman, and congratulations to our new Deputy Chiefs Cadell, Plunkett, and Clement. Thank you. I'll open it up for any council questions. Anybody, Councilman Ranko?
Sorry, thank you, Chief. Really appreciate you being here and congratulations. We are very thankful to hear this news that we are a very safe place. A lot of times people are telling us that we're not so safe. People don't understand the difference between property crime and violent crime, and I think that's very important to note. I appreciate all of your hard work. I do want to keep in close contact about ways that we are supporting our police officers in their mental health. I think that is number one for me personally, and a lot of our constituents. We want to make sure that you guys are all taking the rest that you need and the breaks that you need to be well for your families as well. As a husband who has PTSD, I will tell you that that is very important, and it can have ripple effects if it's not taken care of. I think that's very important. Secondly, I also want to be in very close communication about legislation. Sometimes I feel like legislation will really not give our police officers the leverage that they need to keep our community safe. So I want to make sure that even though we're having this legislation and this, police reform, I want to know when our police officers are saying, I can't do my job. And I don't think that, I think sometimes we really, really need to hear from our police officers. I don't want to silence people who are protecting, our residents. And I also want to hear from others too, who are affected by police officers who are not the good apples. We will admit that, a lot of our, issues on TV and media are because of one bad apple. And that one bad apple can ruin the rest. So keeping in close contact with, how are we holding those bad apples accountable and making sure we don't hire on new bad apples. Right? And so I just really appreciate your work, and I want to make sure that we keep in close communication about that legislation. It's actually very important in the mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, if I may, on the legislation, Councilman Pickle, we have all been on the receiving end of legislation that is passed to the pendulum. Probably no one understands this better than Councilmember Lindstedt. But when you are in response to an action, and it is 11th hour legislation, our police department rallied down on that Capitol. But again, the extenuating circumstances, you don't understand unintended consequences until you understand the unintended consequences. And part of that passage of 217, unfortunately, you now understand the implications of having that pendulum swing so far. I think for us and for Chief Himpleman, I still just love saying that. Working with her over the last 4 years prior to me being city county manager, and right when she got appointed to DC, it was a different vision for Broomfield in that being kind and being nice is different. Being kind is much, it's more difficult. It takes a lot more work. And I think from our police department, what they have been understanding and actualizing is there are things that are outside of our control. And legislation, regardless of how hard anyone was to lean in on 217, there was a murder of an innocent individual that made it very difficult to say, here's what the unintended consequences look like. So when you have a seismic social shift, to temper that is, again, it's impossible. So for us, as a city and county building on a strong foundation already, a lot of what we can't control, if we focus so much time on that, we're not going to focus on what we can control. And as I look at it at Christina Pena-Helm, who is one of, hands down, the best from a connected perspective of truly understanding law enforcement, truly understanding the city and county of Broomfield, truly understanding what the level of expectation is, and being able to digest that information. It really, it's like anything else, it takes a village. So I think what Chief Himpleman has been able to do, everybody's very excited about DC Clement and DC Goodell. And I'm not leaving, so yeah, I've got it. Yeah, so DC Clement has been DC for years and years. So these two are are new to the table. Yeah, but to the mental health piece, Councilmember Hinkle, what these officers have been through is and has been and will continue to be extraordinary. But what Chief Hempelman has been able to do internally through the additional training, through the forms, through the deep dive, and maintaining that what Broomfield community expects, which is a lot. This community has high expectations on every single front and be able to manage and maneuver that. And thank you to Mayor Castriata when we came with the staffing. There was never a question about filling those positions ever. And making the rounds on the roll calls. It was it means a lot to them. So clearly you can tell that we're big PD fans. And the pieces that have been in place are significant and plenty of room to grow, no doubt.
Thank you. We're going to go to Councilmember Cohen next.
Thank you. And I do want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come here and give a report to council. I think it was important that we hear from police every occasionally because you are the probably most visible ambassadors for the city. And obviously health and safety and crime is a top concern to our residents, as you know. And just a couple of quick comments. I wanted to really appreciate all your emphasis on training. Because I know there's been a lot of new information, a lot better new perception of trauma and how traumatized people react or don't react, and how all this training pays off into having a good police force. I've lived in quite a few places. This is the first town I've lived in where no one complains about the police. Usually you can hear a few things here and there. Not that I've had that many interactions myself, but but I think your reputation is well known for having a really strong police department, but it doesn't just happen. It happens through a lot of work. And I do think all this focus on the training, especially the DEI and dealing with trauma and informed responses is really going to pay off. Because I wanted to note that I think it's probably hard to understand some of the legislation coming out because there are communities that don't have this experience. They're having bad experiences, and that's leading to legislation that does sometimes swing too far in the result. But I think we're very fortunate in Broomfield to have the department we have. I have one question I wanted to ask. I think some of us have mentioned this before in terms of the co-responder. I know it's not 24/7. It's still not. What would it take, and is it plausible to get that to full coverage in the year ahead or in 2 years? Yeah.
Money. And I don't say that in jest. I mean, we've had this conversation. Councilmember Cohen, I think right now this would really be the first time because it was 4 years, but the first year was super clunky, right? And so it's awesome that Broomfield gets out in front of so many things. And it's exhausting and labor intensive to be out in front of so many things because there's no blueprint. But Chief Hempelman and her team have it down. So if there was ever a time to entertain what that expansion would look like, but so not only is it, and it is very expensive. That said, staffing, particularly for mental health professionals right now, community reach is really struggling. Mental health partners really struggling. And you'll probably know this better than anyone else up on the dais, Councilmember Cohen, but the teacher shortage that we went through a decade ago, and the impetus for the state to pay back the tuition or reinforce the tuition. Those same conversations are happening right now with these mental health professionals, and it's very tough to staff them. That was one of our real difficulties that continues to be super challenging because you have mental health professionals that are with law enforcement. Seems like it would be just a great combination. But again, it takes a while to develop that tone and that relationship. I can tell you just and not just anecdotally, but the reason we were able to do it, and we took advantage of a state grant for almost $4 million for 6 years. And the grant helps offset the costs. But it doesn't offset the transportation costs, doesn't offset the administrative costs. But I think Chief Hempelman can certainly speak to that, the adage of if you build it, they will come. On the number of calls, Councilmember Cohen, that we're not able to deploy we're at 75,000, right? So if anybody can control what happens in a community, it's all of us, because we have the capability to do that because we're high and tight enough. Speak a little bit to that, Chief Hempelman, if you would.
Yeah, I actually grabbed some stats if you want to know how often we're utilizing that. Would you like that? Just to kind of give you a perspective, so the national average for police response to mental health calls monthly is about 1%. And we on average are 1.24, 1.5 sometimes. But to give you a kind of a glimpse at 1 month, we have about 5,100 calls for service, and we have about 63 mental health calls at times. That averages, sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 60. But the critical, it's funny, when we first got this program, no one knew what it was going to look like. It was a little bit scary, right? And what we see now is our officers, they're so quick to say they go there, they make sure the scene is safe, and to immediately ask for the response for the mental health workers, because they see the benefit of not returning to those calls and getting help getting those services and getting them help when they need it. And so the benefits of that definitely outweighs previously. When we would go on a mental health call, we would put someone on a 72-hour mental health hold. Many times you would go back to the police department, you would do some reports, you would hit the road. A couple hours later, you would see that same individual out and not even being held on the 72-hour hold. So now the difference is these co-responders will respond, provide assistance right then and there, and then follow up, which is so critical to the well-being when someone needs this resource.
Just add real quickly, I know that through trauma training that, establish a relationship first and then direct versus direct, and then relationship works far better. And I think that's part of the genius of the co-responder program, is that social workers are able to establish a relationship that they may not have been able, police officers may not have been able to, or have the time to. And I think that's where it has great potential. So anyway, it's a lot of money, and yes, the demand for mental health services is through the roof. We've seen behaviors change due to COVID. It's made it pretty challenging, but maybe someday if we keep an eye on that and see if there's ever an option to expand it, I think it's obviously very worthwhile. Thank you very much for the figures.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the report, Chief Hempelman. Just wanted to pass along some kudos. So today I got a kudo about the police department in Broomfield. This resident said the ability for our officers to de-escalate and talk down a situation is truly admirable. So wanted to pass that along. And also this morning before my world kind of came upside down, waiting for a test result for COVID, I spent the morning with North Glen High School students, and some of them talked about body worn cameras. And I was proud to tell these students that Broomfield was one of the first communities to implement this in Colorado and the nation. And they were truly blown away, because that's the type of community policing that they were looking for, is really being able to connect with the communities and being able to have those devices that not only serve the community, but also serve the police officer. And that was something that they were talking about, was body worn cameras for police officers, and looking to how to implement this in more police departments. So they love that Broomfield had been on the front lines of that. And lastly, congratulations to all the promotions in the police department. We look forward to your leadership in the community, and especially looking forward to the community coming together with a National Night Out at the end of the summer. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Chap.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me add to my colleagues' comments all the way through. I think there have been a great deal of positive comments about the legacy and the culture of our police department. And so I want to congratulate you for your promotion, and I want to congratulate the other gentlemen for their promotions as well. One of the things you mentioned, I really appreciated your being able to turn to the statistics. That's so important in terms of leading and managing. But you also mentioned that violent crime is low, maybe even in some ways decreasing, but the property crimes are going the other way. I would ask you to consider developing a strategy to deal with that, and then sharing that with council, so that not only can we understand what your approach is going to be or is developing, but we can also share that with our constituents as well. I know in our neighborhood app, I see pretty much every day, my car's been broken into, my son's car was stolen, my whatever. And, that's disconcerting, as you all know. But I think it would be really great for us to be able to share what you are doing in terms of strategies to try to bring that down, keep that down, and overcome those problems.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. And that is going to be a big goal that we're going to be working on now that we have our team together, and especially with the summer coming, that's usually our busier time. More kids are out, more just in general, more property crime. So that's definitely something we'll be working with this year.
Yeah, and some of it's, the fault of the property owner too, leaving your phone right there on the seat, in the car, and then leaving the truck unlocked overnight. I mean, there's that side of the coin as well that we understand. So I'd love to see a strategy that incorporates all of us, as well as your work as well, because you can't do it by yourself, and we can't do it without you.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely agree. And that's why I really try, even when I do a community program myself, I really remind everyone the eyes and ears, right? If you call us when you see it, so many times in the morning when we get a report of something that, when you talk to the neighbor, they say, yeah, I heard this, glass breaking last night around 2 o'clock, but I didn't want to bother you.
Yeah.
And I always tell them the same thing. You never bother us. We're here 24 hours a day. That's why we're here. So it's definitely that community-oriented approach is really the community and the police together. We can't do it by ourselves. That's definitely true. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And Councilmember Leslie, I must say too, a big shout out to our dispatch team. Hearing some of those messages that come in that seem so elementary to us, particularly with our seniors. So the existing council members know that seniors for this staff just rule, and they certainly rule me. So the training transcends from the officers on the street throughout, and I think the dispatch is really the heroes behind the scene that just keep that real modicum, that cool voice on the other end, and that requires a tremendous amount of training as well.
I agree.
More stressful than the plain. Yes, thank you very much, Councilmember Paul. So I'm going to pick you for my partner in Pictionary.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I love my Ring camera and I hate my Ring camera. You know what I mean? Do I need to have all those alerts? And maybe it was better when I didn't know everything that was going on around in my neighborhood. But they have come in handy. But I don't know if you've gotten any of those phantom rings where there's nothing there and it just keeps going off. I don't know why I went there, but
they are a benefit to us once in a while when there is crime being committed. So you're thinking right.
It's an affordable way to get a camera on your door. All right, well that's all we have for you, and we appreciate you coming and staying tonight to give us the fabulous update. Good news. We appreciate all that you do to keep us safe.
Thank you very much for letting us be here.
Awesome. Well, have a good night, y'all.
Mayor, in closing, council will see more of this. Well, not just from the PD, but kind of overall. So we're not waiting for departments, kind of high level overview until the budget. We'll be doing that throughout the year. So you can kind of put a name with the face. We've got a lot of new departments, a lot of new staff that's coming on board. Staff will also, Abby will be sending tomorrow morning, the PowerPoint presentation, as well as timely, Christina and Anea had just presented, I don't know if you all read about the lawsuit that's happening in Boulder.
Oh.
That they just lost because of the training. So my first, so I don't know, 1:30 in the morning, and I happened to read it, so I sent an email, and pop, first thing this morning was, here's all the litany, back to Councilmember Cohen's question and comments about the training. So it'll also give you a sense of what the officers see and experience annually from an ongoing basis. So we'll send you both of those documents tomorrow.
Thank you. So that concludes the agenda item for this evening study session. There being no further business, the study session is adjourned, but we're going to resume our executive session, we'll say in 10 minutes at 9:40.